3 days before Christmas, a single father's world collapsed with a single signature. Ethan Brooks stared at the termination letter, his hands trembling as his daughter's wish list for Santa slipped from his pocket onto the cold office floor. The name at the bottom made his blood run cold. Rachel Lawson, the woman who'd become his worst enemy. But what Ethan didn't know was that this wasn't just a firing, it was a setup, and the person who destroyed his life was about to become the only one who could save it. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in the Riverside manufacturing plant hummed with their usual monotonous drone as Ethan Brooks made his way through the maintenance corridor, his steel-toed boots echoing against the concrete floor. It was December 22nd, and the factory had that peculiar energy that came right before the holiday shutdown. Workers moving faster, conversations louder, everyone eager to get home to their families. Ethan had worked here for 8 years. 8 years of early mornings and late nights, of grease-stained hands and aching muscles, of building a reputation as the guy who could fix anything. The machines trusted him. The other workers trusted him. He'd thought that meant something. He was wrong. "Brooks, my office, now!" The voice cut through the ambient noise like a knife. Ethan turned to see Gerald Hastings, the plant manager, standing in the doorway of his office, with an expression that made Ethan's stomach tighten. Gerald wasn't looking at him with the usual gruff camaraderie. This was something else. Something worse. "What's going on?" Ethan asked as he approached, trying to keep his voice steady. Gerald didn't answer. He just gestured inside with a sharp jerk of his head. As Ethan entered, he saw 2 other people already seated. Mark Holloway, one of the production supervisors, and Rachel Lawson, the HR director. Rachel. Ethan's jaw clenched involuntarily. They had history, not the romantic kind, but the kind forged in conflict and mutual distrust. 6 months ago, Rachel had proposed a new employee evaluation system that Ethan had openly criticized in a staff meeting. He'd called it disconnected from reality and designed by people who've never worked a day on the floor. The room had gone silent. Rachel's face had flushed red, and her eyes had turned to ice. Since then, every interaction between them had been cordial on the surface and hostile underneath. Professional courtesy, masking something sharper. He'd heard through the grapevine that she'd called him insubordinate and a problem waiting to happen. Now she sat across from Gerald's desk, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable, a manila folder in her lap. "Have a seat, Ethan," Gerald said, his voice flat. Ethan remained standing. "I'd rather know what this is about first." "Sit. Down." Gerald's tone left no room for negotiation. Ethan sat, his heart beginning to hammer in his chest. Mark Holloway leaned back in his chair with an expression that might have been satisfaction poorly disguised as concern. Rachel kept her eyes on the folder. Gerald cleared his throat. "Ethan, there's been an incident, a serious safety violation that occurred 3 days ago on line 7. Do you remember being called to repair the hydraulic press?" "Of course I remember," Ethan said. "The pressure valve was malfunctioning. I replaced it and ran a full diagnostic. Everything checked out." "According to the report," Gerald continued, sliding a document across the desk, "you failed to follow proper lockout-tagout procedures. You left the machine in an unsafe condition, and yesterday a worker nearly lost his hand because of your negligence." Ethan's world tilted. "That's not true. I followed every protocol exactly. I always do." "The report says otherwise." Rachel spoke for the first time, her voice cool and professional. She opened the folder and pulled out several printed pages. "We have timestamps showing you bypassed 3 mandatory safety checks. We have a witness statement from Mr. Holloway confirming that you've been taking shortcuts. And we have photographic evidence of the machine left in violation of company standards." "That's impossible." Ethan's voice rose despite his effort to stay calm. "Mark, you know that's not true. You weren't even in that section that day." Mark shrugged, his expression carefully neutral. "I saw what I saw, Brooks. I've been documenting your carelessness for weeks. This was bound to happen eventually." "This is a setup." Ethan stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. "I don't know what this is about, but those records are false." "Are you calling Mr. Holloway a liar?" Rachel's voice was sharp now, cutting. "Are you suggesting that this company would fabricate evidence against you?" "I'm saying someone did, yeah. Ethan locked eyes with her. And I'm wondering why you'd be so quick to believe it without even talking to me first. Something flickered across Rachel's face, too quick to read, before the professional mask returned. This isn't personal, Mr. Brooks. This is about safety. Someone could have died. But they didn't, because I did my job right. The evidence suggests otherwise, Gerald interjected, his voice heavy with what might have been genuine regret. Ethan, you're a good worker, but we can't overlook something like this. Not with the liability involved. Not with OSHA breathing down our necks. The room went silent, except for the distant sound of machinery from the factory floor. Ethan could feel his future crumbling like sand through his fingers. I have a daughter, he said quietly. It was all he could think to say. I have a 7-year-old daughter. Christmas is in 3 days. Rachel's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the folder. I understand this is difficult timing. Difficult timing? Ethan's laugh was bitter. You're firing me 3 days before Christmas. You're taking away my daughter's Christmas because of a lie. It's not a lie, Mark said, his voice carrying an edge of something ugly. It's accountability. Ethan turned on him. What did I ever do to you, Holloway? Why would you do this? This isn't about personal feelings, Rachel cut in, standing now. Mr. Brooks, effective immediately, your employment with Riverside Manufacturing is terminated. You'll receive your final paycheck minus the deductions for damages. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. The words hit him like physical blows. Terminated. Final paycheck. Security escort. You can't do this, Ethan said, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were powerless. They could. They were. Gerald wouldn't meet his eyes. Mark looked almost pleased, and Rachel looked like she was carved from ice, her signature already at the bottom of the termination letter she slid across the desk. Ethan stared at that signature. Rachel Lawson, HR Director. The letter seemed to mock him. I want to appeal this, he said. There's a process. I have rights. You can file a formal appeal, Rachel said, but the termination stands during the investigation. Given the severity of the safety violation, I wouldn't expect what? Expect justice? Expect anyone to believe me over whatever lies you've been fed? Ethan grabbed the termination letter, his hands shaking with fury and fear. I know what this is. This is you finally getting rid of the guy who embarrassed you, the guy who told the truth about your precious system that doesn't work. Rachel's composure cracked just slightly. This has nothing to do with, it has everything to do with that. Ethan's voice cracked. You've hated me since that meeting, and now you're using your power to destroy me right before Christmas. What kind of person does that? The kind who takes safety seriously? Rachel said, but her voice wavered almost imperceptibly. The kind who can't let personal feelings interfere with. Don't talk to me about personal feelings, Ethan said. This entire thing reeks of it. A security guard appeared in the doorway. Rodriguez, a guy Ethan had helped jumpstart his car just last week. Rodriguez wouldn't look at him either. I'll get my things, Ethan said, his voice hollow now. All the fight had drained out of him, replaced by a crushing weight of reality. He had $347 in his checking account. Rent was due in 9 days. Lily's Christmas presents weren't even bought yet. And now, he walked to his locker in a daze, aware of the stares from his coworkers, the whispers spreading like wildfire. Brooks got fired. Safety violation. Christmas Eve. His kid. He cleaned out 8 years of his life in 15 minutes. A few photos of Lily, his spare work gloves. A birthday card she'd made him last year with crayon drawings of the two of them. A coffee mug that said "World's Best Dad," with a handprint she'd made when she was 3. Rodriguez walked him to the door without saying a word. The December air hit Ethan like a slap, cold and merciless. The parking lot stretched before him, ordinary and impossible at the same time. Cars, concrete, the distant sound of a radio playing Christmas music from the guard shack. He sat in his truck for a long time, the termination letter on the passenger seat, Lily's Christmas wish list fallen on top of it. The list was written in her careful, looping handwriting. 1. New doll with the blue dress. 2. Art supplies. 3. A pizza party just me and Daddy. And 4. Snow globe with the castle. 5. For Daddy to be happy. The last item gutted him. For Daddy to be happy. How did she know? How did a 7-year-old see through all his careful pretending, all his forced smiles, all his assurances that everything was fine even when he was drowning? Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from his landlord. Reminder, rent due. Jan 1, no extensions this time. He closed his eyes and let his head fall back against the headrest. What was he going to do? The appeal process would take weeks, maybe months. Even if he won, which seemed impossible given the fabricated evidence, he'd be financially destroyed by then. And if he lost? No. He couldn't think about that. Not yet. First, he had to get home. He had to pick up Lily from his neighbor Mrs. Chen's apartment. He had to smile and act like nothing was wrong and figure out how to make Christmas happen with $347 and no job and a future that looked like a black hole. The apartment was warm when they entered, the radiator clanking its familiar rhythm. Lily dropped her backpack by the door and immediately began chattering about her day at school. Something about a Christmas play rehearsal and how Tommy Peterson forgot his lines and everyone laughed. Ethan made the appropriate responses, his mouth forming words while his mind spun in circles. The kitchen was modest, a small table with 2 mismatched chairs, a refrigerator covered in Lily's drawings, a counter with a coffee maker, and a jar of peanut butter and not much else. He'd meant to go grocery shopping this week. Now every dollar had to be counted. Daddy, can we go see the Christmas market downtown? Lily asked, her eyes bright with hope. Everyone at school went. Sarah said they have lights everywhere and hot chocolate and you can write letters to Santa there. Ethan's heart clenched. The Christmas market was free to enter, but everything there cost money. Hot chocolate, roasted nuts, little toys and trinkets. He'd been planning to take her this weekend before everything fell apart. Sure, sweetheart, he heard himself say. Let's go tonight. Really? Lily's face lit up like he'd promised her the moon. Can we get hot chocolate? We'll see, Ethan said, which was his standard response when he meant probably not, but didn't want to disappoint her right away. But as he watched her run to her room to find her favorite hat, a purple knit thing with cat ears that she loved, he made a decision. They would get hot chocolate. They would walk through the market. He would give her this one evening of normal, of magic, of being 7 years old at Christmas time before the world came crashing down. He could afford $10 for hot chocolate and maybe a roasted pretzel. He could afford one more night of being the dad who made things okay. Tomorrow, he'd start job hunting. Tomorrow, he'd figure out how to survive. Tonight, he'd give his daughter Christmas. The downtown market was everything Lily had promised and more. Strings of white lights crisscrossed the pedestrian square, creating a canopy of stars. Wooden booths lined the walkways, selling everything from handmade ornaments to mulled wine. The air smelled of cinnamon and pine and roasting chestnuts. Christmas music drifted from speakers hidden in the trees. Families crowded the paths, bundled in winter coats, their faces glowing with cold and happiness. Couples held gloved hands. Children ran between the booths, their laughter echoing off the old brick buildings that surrounded the square. Ethan felt like an imposter among them. They had futures. They had security. They weren't fired. They weren't drowning. But Lily was incandescent with joy. She held his hand tightly as they walked, pointing at every decoration, every light display, every booth with the breathless wonder that only children possess. For this moment, in her world, everything was perfect. They stopped at the hot chocolate stand, and Ethan ordered 2 cups, watching his wallet thin by $8. The vendor, a woman with kind eyes and rosy cheeks, handed Lily her cup with extra marshmallows and a conspiratorial wink. For the pretty girl with the cat hat, she said. Thank you, Lily beamed. Do you know Santa? Oh, I know him very well, the woman said seriously. In fact, he was just here an hour ago, said he's almost ready for the big night. Lily's eyes went wide. Did he say if he got my letter? I'm sure he did. Santa never misses a letter. As they walked away, Lily turned to Ethan with urgent concern. Daddy, did you mail my letter? I put it on the table. Ethan's throat tightened. The letter was still on the table, unmailed, because he'd been too exhausted and too stressed to remember. I'll mail it tomorrow, first thing. Santa will get it in time, I promise. Lily nodded, satisfied, and took a careful sip of her hot chocolate. It's perfect, she sighed. They walked slowly through the market, Lily exclaiming over ornaments shaped like cats and dogs, stopping to watch a puppet show, writing her name in the guest book at the North Pole post office booth. Ethan moved through it in a strange duality, present and absent at the same time. He smiled when she smiled. He laughed when she laughed. But underneath, the panic was building. What was he going to tell her? Not tonight, not tomorrow. But soon, maybe after Christmas, he'd have to explain why they were moving to a cheaper apartment, why Daddy was working weird hours at worse jobs, why things were going to be different for a while. Daddy, look! Lily was pointing at a booth selling wooden toys. In the window was a snow globe, not the one from her list, but similar. A castle inside, with snowflakes that swirled when you shook it. The price tag said $24. It's beautiful, Ethan said carefully. It's like the one I asked Santa for, Lily said, pressing her face close to the glass. Do you think he'll bring it? I think Santa always does his best, Ethan said, which wasn't an answer, but was all he could manage. They stayed at the market for another hour, until Lily was yawning and the crowds were beginning to thin. As they walked back to where Ethan had parked his truck, 6 blocks away because the closer lots were $15, Lily slipped her small hand into his. Daddy? She said quietly. Yeah, Bug. Are you okay? The question nearly broke him. I'm fine, sweetheart. Why? You seem sad. You've been sad a lot lately. Ethan stopped walking and knelt down so he was eye level with her. Her face was serious beneath the ridiculous cat ear hat, her eyes, so much like her mother's, filled with a worry that no 7-year-old should have to carry. I'm not sad, he lied. I'm just tired from work. But you know what makes me not tired? What? You. Every single day you make everything better. It was the most honest thing he'd said all day. Lily threw her arms around his neck and hugged him fiercely. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, Bug, more than anything in the whole world. When they got home, Ethan tucked Lily into bed with her worn stuffed rabbit and read her a chapter from the book they were working through, something about a girl who found a magical door in her basement. Lily fell asleep before the chapter ended, her breathing soft and even. Ethan sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, watching her sleep. Her room was small but filled with evidence of love, drawings taped to the walls, a shelf of books from the library, the quilt his mother had made before she died. Not expensive things, but things that mattered. He'd been so careful these last 3 years since Sarah had died, so careful to be both mother and father, to make sure Lily felt secure and loved, to shield her from the constant worry about money and the loneliness that sometimes felt like it would consume him. He'd thought he was doing okay. Maybe not great, but okay. Now it was all falling apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. At 11 p.m., after staring at his laptop screen for 2 hours, Ethan had applied to 16 jobs. Maintenance technician, warehouse worker, delivery driver, overnight stalker, anything that might hire someone fired for safety violations 3 days before Christmas. Most wouldn't even look at his application until after New Year's. The ones that might were offering $12.14 an hour, nearly half what he'd been making. Even if he got one of them, he'd never make rent, never catch up, never dig out of the hole he was falling into. His phone buzzed with an email notification. For a wild moment, he hoped it was a job response, someone, anyone, willing to hire him immediately. Instead, it was from Riverside Manufacturing's benefits department, a form letter explaining that his health insurance would terminate at the end of the month. If he wanted to continue coverage through Cobra, it would cost $847 per month. Ethan laughed, a harsh, broken sound in the quiet apartment. $847 per month. He didn't have $847 total. The walls were closing in. He could feel them, physical and pressing. His chest tightened, his breathing quickened. The panic attack came fast and vicious, the way they had in the months after Sarah died. He gripped the edge of the kitchen table and tried to remember the breathing exercises the grief counselor had taught him. 4 counts in. Hold. 4 counts out. It didn't work. The panic swirled and built until he thought he might scream, might break something, might drive his truck off a bridge just to make the fear stop. Then he looked up and saw Lily's drawing on the refrigerator. The two of them, holding hands, under a rainbow. Daddy and me, written in uneven letters across the bottom. The panic didn't stop, but it lost its teeth. He couldn't fall apart. Not completely. Not when she needed him. 4 counts in. Hold. 4 counts out. Slowly, eventually, the breathing helped. The room stopped spinning. The walls stopped pressing. He was left exhausted and hollowed out, but functional. He opened his laptop again and began searching for a different kind of job. The kind available immediately. The kind that didn't ask too many questions. He found a listing for night shift warehouse work at a logistics company on the edge of town. Manual labor, loading and unloading trucks. $14 an hour, but they were hiring immediately for the Christmas rush. Available shifts, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It would mean sleeping while Lily was at school, being a zombie in the evenings, running on coffee and desperation. But it was money. It was something. He filled out the application with shaking hands, hit submit, stared at the confirmation screen. Then he checked the time. 11:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, it would be December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. 2 days to figure out how to give his daughter something resembling a normal holiday. 2 days to hold himself together. He could do that. He had to. Ethan stood and walked quietly to Lily's room. She was still asleep, her face peaceful, her hand curled around her rabbit's ear. He adjusted her blanket, kissed her forehead softly, and whispered into the darkness. I won't let us go under. I promise. It was a promise made to her, to himself, to the ghost of Sarah somewhere in the universe. He didn't know if he could keep it, but he would try. God, he would try. The logistics company called at 8:15 the next morning. The voice on the other end was gruff and businesslike. You apply for night shift warehouse? Yes, Ethan said, his heart pounding. Can you start tonight? Tonight? Yes, absolutely. 10 p.m. Bring ID and wear closed-toe shoes. We'll do paperwork when you get here. The call ended before Ethan could even say thank you. He stared at his phone in disbelief. A job. Not a good job. Not even a decent job. But a job. Money. A lifeline. He wanted to feel relieved. Instead, he felt numb. This was what rock bottom looked like. Being grateful for night shift warehouse work at $14 an hour 3 days before Christmas. But he pushed the thought away. There was no room for self-pity, only forward motion. He made Lily breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, the last of the bread. She ate happily, chattering about the final day of school before winter break, about the party they were having in her classroom, about how her teacher said they could bring one small gift to exchange. Can I bring one of my old coloring books? Lily asked. The one with princesses? I already colored all the pictures, but Sarah M. doesn't have any coloring books, and she's my friend. Ethan's heart squeezed. His daughter wanted to give away one of her few possessions to a friend who had less. That's really kind of you, Bug. Yeah, you can bring it. Thanks, Daddy. She finished her eggs and hopped down from her chair. Are you working today? Not today, Ethan said. But I'll be working tonight, late. How late? Really late. So Mrs. Chen will check on you if you need anything, okay? But I'll be home when you wake up for Christmas Eve. Lily nodded, accepting this the way she accepted everything, with trust that Daddy knew what he was doing and things would be okay. If only that were true. After dropping Lily at school, Ethan drove to 3 pawn shops. He'd gathered everything in his apartment that had any value. An old guitar he never played anymore, his wedding ring, Sarah's jewelry box with the few pieces she'd owned, a watch his father had given him for his high school graduation. The first pawn shop offered him $150 for everything. The second offered $180. The third, a cramped place that smelled like cigarettes and desperation, offered $215. Ethan took it, watched the pawnbroker tag his wedding ring and write him a receipt, felt like he was betraying Sarah's memory with every item he handed over. But he had $562 now. Enough for rent if he could scrape together another $40 somehow. Enough for a Christmas that wasn't completely barren. Enough to buy a few more days. He stopped at a discount store on the way home, walked the aisles like a ghost. Found a snow globe with a castle for $17.99, cheaper than the one at the market, but close enough. Found a small art supply kit for $12. A doll with a blue dress that wasn't the one from Lily's list but might pass. $24 on clearance. At the register, the total came to $61.43. Ethan paid with cash and tried not to think about how little was left. Tried not to think about how Sarah used to make Christmas magical on nothing, handmade gifts and cookies, and love somehow stretched to fill all the spaces money couldn't. He missed her so much in that moment it was physical pain. The gifts were pathetic compared to what other kids would get. But they were something. They were Christmas. They would have to be enough. That night, Ethan reported to the warehouse at 9:50 p.m. The building was massive and cold, the kind of place where human beings were interchangeable parts in a machine designed to move products from point A to point B as efficiently as possible. The supervisor, a tired-looking man named Jenkins, barely glanced at Ethan's ID before shoving a clipboard at him. "Sign here, here, and here. You're on loading dock B. Don't take breaks longer than 10 minutes. Don't damage merchandise. Don't get hurt. Questions?" "No, sir." "Good. Get to work." The work was brutal. 8 solid hours of hauling boxes, loading trucks, sorting packages in the freezing dock bay. Ethan's body hadn't done this kind of labor in years. His maintenance work at the factory had been skilled, problem-solving, machine repair, technical diagnostics. This was just muscle and endurance and willpower. His back screamed, his shoulders burned, his hands went numb from the cold. Around him, other workers moved like zombies. No conversation, no camaraderie, just silent human machinery processing an endless stream of boxes. During his 3 a.m. break, Ethan sat on a loading dock with a cup of bad coffee and stared at his phone. He'd gotten one email response to his job applications. "Thank you for your interest. Unfortunately, we've decided to pursue other candidates." He deleted it without feeling anything. Someone sat down next to him, a younger guy, maybe mid-20s with exhausted eyes. "First night? That obvious?" Ethan asked. "You're not dead inside yet. Give it time." The guy smiled without humor. "I'm Marcus." "Ethan? What's your story? Nobody takes night shift warehouse unless they're desperate." Ethan thought about lying, about maintaining some dignity. But what was the point? "Got fired. Single dad. Need money." Marcus nodded like this was the most normal thing in the world. "Got a kid too. 2, actually. Mom left. Couldn't handle it." He took a sip of coffee. "This job sucks, but it's money. That's all that matters, right?" "Right," Ethan agreed. They sat in silence for a while, 2 fathers working through the night while their children slept, doing what needed to be done because there wasn't another option. "Hey," Marcus said eventually. "Merry almost Christmas." "Yeah," Ethan said. "Merry almost Christmas." When his shift ended at 6 a.m., Ethan drove home through the dark streets as the city was just beginning to wake up. The Christmas lights that had seemed magical 2 nights ago now looked cheap and hollow. The decorated houses felt like mockery. Look at what you don't have. Look at what you can't give your daughter. Look at how you failed. He parked outside his apartment building and sat in his truck, too exhausted to move. His phone buzzed. "Mrs. Chen. Lily woke up. I gave her breakfast. She's asking for you." Ethan dragged himself upstairs. His body felt like it was made of lead. Every muscle ached. His hands were covered in small cuts from handling boxes. He smelled like sweat and cardboard and failure. But when he opened the door and Lily came running to hug him, her face bright with morning energy, he found one more reserve of strength to smile at her. "Daddy, you're home! It's Christmas Eve!" "I know, Bug." He lifted her up even though his back protested. "What should we do today? Can we make cookies like Mommy used to?" The request was a knife to his heart. "Yeah, we can make cookies." They spent the morning in the tiny kitchen, Lily standing on a chair to help mix ingredients, getting flour everywhere, laughing when the first batch came out burnt. Ethan moved through it on autopilot, his body present, while his mind drifted in and out of consciousness. At one point, Lily tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, are you sure you're okay?" "Just tired from work, sweetheart." "Does your new job make you this tired?" "It's temporary," Ethan lied. "Just helping out for the holidays." Lily nodded, but her eyes were worried. Those eyes that saw too much. That knew something was wrong even if she couldn't name it. By noon, Ethan couldn't stay awake any longer. He set Lily up with her art supplies and a Christmas movie, asked Mrs. Chen to check in, and collapsed into bed with his alarm set for 8 p.m. He dreamed of the factory, of Rachel Lawson's cold eyes and Mark Holloway's satisfied smile, of his wedding ring behind glass in a pawn shop, of being buried under an avalanche of boxes, suffocating, unable to breathe, while somewhere far away Lily called for him and he couldn't reach her. He woke up gasping, his shirt soaked with sweat, his alarm blaring. 8 p.m. Time to go back to the warehouse. Time to do it all over again. This was his life now. This was Christmas. What Ethan didn't know, couldn't know, was that at that exact moment, 43 blocks away, Rachel Lawson was sitting in her car outside the warehouse where he worked, her hands gripped tight on the steering wheel, watching the entrance. She'd followed him. She didn't know why. Guilt? Conscience? Morbid curiosity about what happened to the lives she helped destroy? She watched him get out of his truck, moving slow like a man 3 times his age, watched him limp slightly as he walked toward the building, watched him disappear inside to work through another night. Rachel's hands were shaking. The file was in her passenger seat. Ethan Brooks' termination paperwork. She'd looked at it 3 times today. The report that got him fired. The timestamps, the witness statement, the photos. She'd looked at it because something was bothering her, something small and persistent, like a splinter under the skin. The formatting was slightly off. The timestamps were oddly specific. Mark Holloway's witness statement read like it had been written by someone with legal training, not a floor supervisor. Small things. Probably nothing. But Rachel hadn't gotten to her position by ignoring details. And the more she looked, the more the details bothered her. She pulled out her phone and texted her assistant. I need the original incident report for the Line 7 safety violation, not the final, the initial one filed the day of. The response came back quickly. I'll have it to you first thing after Christmas. Rachel put her phone away and started her car. She sat there for another moment, watching the warehouse, thinking about the man inside working through the night just to survive. The man whose life she'd helped end with a single signature. She drove away telling herself this was just due diligence, just double-checking, just making sure the system worked the way it was supposed to. But deep down, in a place she didn't want to examine too closely, Rachel was beginning to suspect that something was very, very wrong. And if she was right, she didn't know what scared her more, that she'd destroyed an innocent man's life, or that she'd have to choose between her career and doing the right thing. Christmas Eve stretched before them both, full of secrets and consequences neither of them could see yet. But somewhere in the darkness, the truth was waiting, and it wouldn't stay hidden much longer. Rachel's apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of pipes in the walls. It was a nice apartment, 14th floor, downtown views, hardwood floors that echoed when she walked. The kind of place that said successful professional without being ostentatious. She'd worked hard for this life, climbed every rung carefully, made every right decision. Until now, maybe. The original incident report sat on her dining room table, delivered by her assistant at 7 a.m. on Christmas morning with an apologetic text about working on the holiday. Rachel had been awake anyway, hadn't really slept since watching Ethan Brooks walk into that warehouse 2 nights ago. She poured her 3rd cup of coffee. It was barely 8 a.m., and opened the file with fingers that were steadier than she felt. The first page was standard documentation. Date, time, location, initial report filed by Jim Patterson, the floor supervisor who'd been on duty that day. Rachel read it carefully, her legal training making her eyes catch on specific details, specific phrasings. Called to line 7 at approximately 2:17 p.m. for hydraulic press malfunction. Technician Brooks responded within 5 minutes. Observed him perform standard diagnostic procedures. Machine repaired and tested. Brooks completed lockout-tagout protocols as observed. Signed off at 3:45 p.m. No issues noted. Rachel read it again, then a 3rd time. No issues noted. She set the page down and picked up the final report, the one that had landed on her desk, the one she'd used to terminate Ethan Brooks. Her eyes scanned to the relevant section. Technician Brooks responded to line 7 at approximately 2:20 p.m. Multiple safety protocols bypassed. Lockout-tagout procedures not followed. Machine left in unsafe condition. Incident discovered following day during routine inspection by Supervisor Holloway. Rachel felt something cold settle in her stomach. She placed the two reports side by side. The original? No issues noted. The final? Multiple safety protocols bypassed. She grabbed her laptop and opened the electronic filing system, pulling up the metadata for both documents. The original report had been filed on December 19th at 4:03 p.m., right after the repair was completed. The final report had been uploaded on December 21st at 11:47 p.m. 2 days later, almost midnight. Rachel's coffee went cold as she dug deeper. The final report showed 3 editors in the revision history: Jim Patterson, who'd written the original; Mark Holloway, who'd apparently made corrections; and someone listed only as admin override, a designation that required management-level access. Her hands moved faster now, pulling up more files. The photographs attached to the final report, supposedly showing the machine in an unsafe condition. She zoomed in on the metadata embedded in the image files. Taken December 21st, 11:34 p.m. 2 full days after Ethan had completed the repair. 2 days in which dozens of workers had been using Line 7 with no incidents, no complaints, no problems. No, Rachel whispered to her empty apartment. No, no, no. She pulled up Mark Holloway's personnel file, scrolled through his employment history, found something that made her breath catch: a formal complaint filed 8 months ago by Ethan Brooks, claiming Holloway had falsified a quality control report to cover up his own mistake. The complaint had been investigated and dismissed due to insufficient evidence. Rachel's mind was racing now, making connections, seeing patterns she'd been too quick to dismiss. She thought about that meeting in Gerald's office, how Mark had been so prepared, so certain, how his witness statement had been typed and printed, not handwritten like most floor reports, how he'd barely looked at Ethan when he was lying about seeing safety violations. She thought about her own motivations, about that staff meeting 6 months ago when Ethan had embarrassed her in front of everyone, about how she'd carried that anger, let it simmer, let it color her judgment. When the report had crossed her desk with Ethan's name on it, had she looked as closely as she should have? Or had some part of her been satisfied to finally have cause to remove a problem employee? The truth was ugly, and it sat in her chest like a stone. She'd been negligent. Maybe not malicious, but negligent. She'd let personal feelings cloud her judgment. She'd trusted documentation without verifying it. She'd fired a man 3 days before Christmas based on evidence she hadn't properly scrutinized. And if she was right, if the report had been falsified, then she'd destroyed an innocent man's life. Rachel's phone rang, making her jump. Gerald Hastings' name flashed on the screen. She almost didn't answer, but professional instinct overrode personal turmoil. "Merry Christmas, Rachel." Gerald's voice was warm but tired. "Sorry to bother you on the holiday." "It's fine. What's going on?" "I wanted to give you a heads up. Mark Holloway submitted a formal complaint this morning. Says you've been accessing personnel files without authorization. Implies you're on some kind of witch hunt. The complaint went straight to corporate." Rachel's grip tightened on the phone. "I have authorization to access any files related to active HR investigations." "Is there an active investigation I don't know about?" She hesitated. This was the moment. She could back down, protect herself, let it go. Or she could step off the cliff and hope there was ground somewhere below. "I'm reviewing the Brooks termination," she said. "There are inconsistencies in the documentation." Silence on the other end. Then, "Rachel, the case is closed. Brooks was fired for cause. Unless he files a formal appeal, the original incident report contradicts the final version," Rachel cut in. The photographs were taken 2 days after the alleged violation. The witness statement shows signs of— "Stop!" Gerald's voice was sharp now. "Stop right there. Do you understand what you're suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we may have made a mistake." "We didn't make a mistake. We followed protocol. We reviewed evidence. We made a decision based on the information available. Information that may have been falsified." Another silence, longer this time. When Gerald spoke again, his voice was careful, measured. "Rachel, I'm going to give you some advice as someone who's been doing this a lot longer than you. Sometimes you have to trust the system. You can't second-guess every decision. If you go down this road, if you start accusing other employees of fabricating evidence, it's going to blow back on you. Hard. Even if it's true? Especially if it's true. Mark Holloway has friends in corporate. He's been with the company 12 years. You start throwing around accusations, they're going to ask why you didn't catch these inconsistencies before you signed the termination. They're going to wonder about your judgment, your competence. Rachel felt her face flush. So I should just ignore it? I'm saying you should be very, very sure before you do anything. And I'm saying that fighting this fight might cost you more than you're willing to lose. Your career is on the line here, Rachel. And what about Ethan Brooks' career? His life? He can file an appeal. That's what the process is for. With what money, Gerald? With what time? He has a kid. He's probably working whatever awful job he could find just to survive Christmas. You think he can afford a lawyer? You think he can afford to wait months for an investigation? That's not our problem. The words hit her like a slap. Not our problem? We fired him. We destroyed his livelihood. How is that not our problem? Gerald's voice went cold. Our problem is running a business. Our problem is protecting the company from liability. Our problem is not cleaning up the personal lives of former employees. I suggest you remember that. The line went dead. Rachel sat staring at her phone, rage and fear warring in her chest. She thought about the path ahead. Keep digging, prove the report was falsified, potentially destroy her career and reputation in the process. Or walk away, protect herself, let Ethan Brooks drown in the consequences of someone else's malice and her own negligence. The choice should have been obvious. Self-preservation. Career protection. It's what any rational person would do. But Rachel kept seeing Ethan's face in that meeting. The shock, the desperation, the way he'd said, "I have a daughter," like it was the only argument that mattered. The way he'd looked at her signature on his termination letter like she'd personally betrayed him. Maybe she had. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "Mom's asking when you're coming over. We're doing presents at noon." Rachel looked at her dining room table, covered in files and reports, at her laptop screen full of metadata and timestamps, at the evidence of wrongdoing that she couldn't unsee now. She typed back, "I'll be there. Might be a little late." Then she opened a new document on her laptop and began typing. Not a formal report, not an official investigation, just notes, observations. A timeline of inconsistencies. Evidence that might matter if she decided to push this further, if she decided to risk everything. The morning stretched on. Rachel worked through Christmas brunch, through the time she should have been showering and getting ready, through the guilt of making her family wait. She built a case the way she'd been trained, methodically, carefully, documenting every discrepancy. By 11 a.m., she had 23 pages of notes, 23 pages that proved, at least to her legal eye, that Mark Holloway had falsified an incident report and destroyed a man's career out of personal vendetta. 23 pages that would make her a target if she used them. Rachel saved the document, encrypted it, backed it up to 3 different locations. Then she finally showered and dressed and drove to her mother's house, arriving an hour and a half late to Christmas celebration with her family. Her sister pulled her aside in the kitchen while everyone else was in the living room opening presents. "Are you okay? You look awful." "Work stuff," Rachel said. "On Christmas?" "It's complicated." Her sister studied her face. "Is this about that guy? The one you fired?" Rachel's head snapped up. "How do you know about that?" "You've been different this week. Distracted. Guilty looking." Her sister leaned against the counter. "I know you, Rachel. I know when something's eating at you. Did you fire someone right before Christmas?" "I had to. He violated safety protocols. Someone could have been hurt." But I think maybe he didn't. I think maybe someone framed him, and I think I didn't look hard enough because I didn't like him. Because he'd embarrassed me, and part of me wanted him gone." Her sister was quiet for a long moment. "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know. If I pursue this, I could lose my job, my reputation, everything I've worked for. And if you don't, then an innocent man stays destroyed and I have to live with knowing I let it happen." Her sister reached out and squeezed her hand. "You already know what you're going to do. You just don't want to admit it yet." Rachel looked at her. Her younger sister, who'd always been braver, more reckless, more willing to fight for what was right, regardless of cost. "How do you always know?" "Because you're a good person pretending to be a corporate robot. But the good person always wins eventually. It's annoying, actually. Makes the rest of us look bad. Despite everything, Rachel smiled. I might need a lawyer if this goes badly. I know a guy. He's expensive, but he's good. Her sister squeezed her hand again. But honestly, I don't think you're going to need him. I think you're going to fix this. Rachel wished she had that confidence. They rejoined the family. Rachel opened presents mechanically, a scarf from her mother, a book from her nephew, gift cards and wine, and things that felt meaningless compared to the weight sitting on her shoulders. She smiled and thanked everyone and pretended she was present when her mind was 43 blocks away in a warehouse where Ethan Brooks was probably working through another night shift. At 3 p.m., her phone buzzed. An email from corporate. Her heart stopped until she opened it and realized it was just the automated holiday message, wishing all employees a Merry Christmas and reminding them the office would be closed through New Year's Day. The office would be closed, which meant she had a week before she had to make any official moves, a week to gather more evidence, a week to decide if she was really going to do this. She left her mother's house at 6 p.m., claimed exhaustion, deflected concerns about her health and her love life and her career, drove home through streets full of Christmas lights and happy families, feeling more alone than she'd felt in years. At home, she opened her laptop again, read through her notes, added more observations. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she composed an email to Jim Patterson, the floor supervisor who'd written the original incident report. Jim, I'm reviewing some documentation and had a few questions about the Line 7 incident from December 19th. Would you be available to speak with me after the holiday? It's important. She hit send before fear could stop her. Then she pulled up the warehouse where Ethan worked. Their website showed they were open 24/7, even on Christmas. She looked at the clock, 6:47 p.m. If Ethan was working the same shift as before, he'd be there now. Rachel grabbed her keys. 20 minutes later, she was sitting in her car outside the warehouse again, watching workers come and go during shift changes. She didn't know what she was doing here, didn't know what she'd say if she saw him. Sorry, I destroyed your life. Sorry, I didn't do my job properly. Sorry, I let personal feelings override professional judgment. The words all sounded hollow. She was about to leave when she saw him. Ethan Brooks, walking toward the entrance with that same tired limp, wearing a jacket too thin for the winter cold, carrying a lunchbox that probably held whatever cheap food he could afford now. Rachel's hand moved toward her car door. She could call out to him, could tell him she was investigating, could give him something, hope, maybe, or at least acknowledgement that something was wrong. But what if she was wrong? What if she dug deeper and found out the evidence was legitimate somehow? What if she gave him false hope and then had to crush it again? Her hand fell back to her lap. Ethan disappeared inside the building. Rachel sat in her car for another 20 minutes, watching the entrance, wrestling with herself. Finally, she started the engine and drove home, feeling like a coward, but not knowing what else to be. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about her conversation with Gerald, about how he'd said that sometimes you have to trust the system, about how fighting this could cost her everything. But what was everything worth if she'd become the kind of person who knowingly let injustice stand because fixing it was inconvenient? At 2 a.m., she gave up on sleep and went back to her dining room table, opened her laptop, started writing a new document, this one formal, official, structured like the legal brief it would need to be. Request for internal investigation into potential documentation fraud. Related to employee termination. Ethan Brooks, case number 2024-1991. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, building the case point by point, citation by citation, evidence by evidence. It was what she was good at, taking complicated information and making it clear, making it undeniable, making it impossible to ignore. By dawn on December 26th, she had a 37-page document outlining every inconsistency, every timeline discrepancy, every piece of evidence that suggested Mark Holloway had fabricated the incident report. It was thorough. It was meticulous. It was damning. It was also career suicide if she was wrong. Rachel saved the document and closed her laptop. Her hands were shaking from too much coffee and too little sleep. She thought about what her sister had said, that she already knew what she was going to do. Maybe that was true. Maybe the moment she'd driven to that warehouse, the moment she'd pulled those files, the moment she'd allowed herself to question the documentation, she'd already made her choice. She just had to find the courage to follow through. Her phone buzzed. Jim Patterson responding to her email. Happy to talk. Something about that whole situation bothered me, but I figured it wasn't my place. Give me a call. Rachel's heart started pounding. She looked at the clock. 7:13 a.m. Too early to call, but she dialed anyway. Jim picked up on the second ring. Rachel, that you? Jim, thanks for responding. I know it's early. It's fine. Been up since 5. Old habits. He paused. What's this about? The Brooks incident. I'm reviewing the documentation and I noticed the final report is significantly different from your initial filing. Silence. Then, yeah, I noticed that too. Can you tell me what happened? I can tell you what I know, which isn't much. I filed my report same day, like always. Said Brooks did everything right, no issues. Next day, Holloway comes to me and says, I must have missed something. Says corporate needs a revised report. I told him I didn't miss anything, but he said it wasn't optional. Rachel's pulse quickened. Did you revise the report? I tried to push back, but Holloway went over my head. Next thing I know, there's a new version in the system with my name on it, except I didn't write half of it. I thought about saying something, but he trailed off. But what? But I got 3 years until retirement and a pension to protect. And Holloway made it clear that questioning this would be bad for my health, professionally speaking. Jim's voice was heavy with regret. I know that makes me a coward, but I got a wife with medical bills and grandkids depending on me. I couldn't afford to be a hero. I understand, Rachel said, and she did. That's what made systems like this work. Good people making rational choices to protect themselves, until suddenly there was no one left willing to fight. Brooks is a good guy, Jim continued. Best technician we had. Whatever Holloway said about him, it was bullshit. That kid never cut corners, never took risks. This whole thing stunk from the beginning. Would you be willing to make a formal statement to that effect? Another long pause. If it comes to that, if you're really going to push this, then yeah, I'll tell the truth. But Rachel, you need to know what you're walking into. Holloway's got protection. He's tight with some people in corporate, and they're not going to like having this reopened. I know. Your career could end over this. I know that too. Then why are you doing it? Rachel thought about Ethan Brooks limping into a warehouse on Christmas night, about his daughter who probably didn't understand why her father suddenly looked so broken, about the signature at the bottom of a termination letter, her signature, that had changed their lives. Because it's the right thing to do, she said simply. Jim laughed softly. Yeah, okay. Good luck, Rachel. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't have your guts when it mattered. You're helping now. That's what matters. After hanging up, Rachel sat staring at her phone. She had testimony now. She had evidence. She had enough to take this to corporate and demand an investigation. She also had Mark Holloway's formal complaint against her, accusing her of harassment and unauthorized access to files, which meant if she pushed this, it would look like retaliation, like a personal vendetta, like exactly the kind of emotionally driven witch hunt that got HR directors fired. Rachel opened her laptop again, looked at the 37 pages she'd written, thought about the path ahead, filing the complaint, enduring the investigation, watching her reputation get dragged through the mud while Mark's allies in corporate circled the wagons. Then she thought about another option, a riskier one, a stupider one probably, but maybe the only one that would actually work. She grabbed her phone and dialed a number she'd sworn she'd never call again. It rang 4 times before a familiar voice answered, thick with sleep. Rachel, what the hell? It's 7:30 in the morning the day after Christmas. David, I need your help. David Chen, her ex-boyfriend, an investigative journalist for the city paper, the man she'd broken up with 2 years ago because he'd said her job was making her morally compromised. They hadn't spoken since. With what? His voice was wary now. With exposing corporate corruption and document fraud at my company. A pause. Is this a joke? I'm completely serious. I have evidence that a supervisor fabricated an incident report to get an employee fired, and I think there are people in corporate who helped cover it up. I can't go through official channels without getting buried, so I need someone on the outside who can make enough noise that they can't ignore it. Rachel Lawson, HR director, is asking a journalist to investigate her own company? David sounded like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Are you having a breakdown? Probably. Will you help me or not? Another pause. Meet me at Joe's Diner in an hour. Bring everything you have. The line went dead. Rachel sat back, her heart hammering. She'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Once she handed this information to David, once it became a story, there was no going back. The company would know she was the source. She'd be fired, probably sued, definitely blacklisted. Everything she'd worked for, destroyed. But she grabbed her files anyway. Backed up her documents again, got dressed in jeans and a sweater instead of her usual professional attire. Some kind of psychological preparation for being unemployed, maybe. At Joe's Diner, a greasy spoon that served breakfast all day, she found David in a back booth. He looked older, more gray hair, deeper lines around his eyes, but the same sharp intelligence in his expression. "You look terrible," he said as she slid into the seat across from him. "Thanks. You look old." "Touché." He gestured at the files she was carrying. "That the evidence?" Rachel hesitated one last time. This was it, the point of no return. Then she pushed the files across the table. "Everything's in there. The original report versus the final version, the metadata showing when photos were actually taken, testimony from the supervisor who filed the initial report, personnel records showing a pattern of retaliation. It's all documented." David opened the first file and began reading. His expression shifted from skeptical to interested to angry as he went through the pages. After 10 minutes of silence, he looked up. "This is good," he said. "This is really good. If even half of this holds up, it's a hell of a story." "It's not about the story," Rachel said. "It's about fixing what I broke." "You mean the guy who got fired? What's his name, Ethan Brooks?" "Yes." "What's he to you?" "Nothing. I mean, I barely know him. We had some conflicts before this, but that doesn't matter. He's innocent, and I helped destroy his life, and I need to fix it." David studied her face. The Rachel I knew would never have done this, would never have risked her career for a principal. What changed? Rachel thought about the question. What had changed? When had she stopped being the person who followed rules and trusted systems and climbed ladders? Maybe it was seeing Ethan in that warehouse. Or maybe it was recognizing herself in Gerald's cold calculation that other people's suffering wasn't their problem. Or maybe it was her sister saying that the good person always wins, eventually. "I don't know," she said finally. "Maybe I just hit my limit." David smiled, the first real smile since she'd arrived. "I always thought you had more spine than you let on. Took you long enough to figure it out." He gathered the files. "Give me 48 hours. I'll verify what I can, get some additional sources, and then I'm running this. Front page above the fold. By the time it hits, Riverside Manufacturing won't have any choice but to act. They're going to know it came from me." "Definitely." "I'll be fired." "Almost certainly." "Blacklisted from every HR position in the city." "That depends on how the story plays. If you come off as a whistleblower who exposed corruption, you might be fine. If you come off as a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind, then yeah, your career is toast." Rachel nodded, accepting this. "Do you need anything else from me?" "Interview with Brooks would be good, his side of the story, but I can track him down." "Don't ambush him. Please. He's been through enough." "I'll be gentle." David paused. "For what it's worth, Rachel, this is the right thing. Probably the stupid thing, career-wise, but the right thing. Everyone keeps saying that like it's supposed to be comforting." "Isn't it?" Rachel laughed humorlessly. "Ask me when I'm unemployed and blacklisted." She left the diner feeling strangely light, like she'd set down a weight she'd been carrying for so long she'd forgotten it was there. The fear was still present, screaming, actually, about consequences and career suicide and financial ruin. But underneath it was something else. Relief, maybe. Or purpose. Or just the simple satisfaction of finally doing something instead of agonizing over it. Her phone rang as she was getting into her car. Gerald Hastings again. She almost didn't answer, but old habits died hard. We need to talk, Gerald said without preamble. Mark Holloway has escalated his complaint. Corporate wants a meeting on the 30th to address allegations of harassment and unauthorized investigation. They're sending someone from legal. I see. Rachel, you need to drop this. Whatever you're doing, whatever you think you found, it's not worth it. Come to this meeting, apologize for overstepping, promise to leave the Brooks case alone, and we can all move forward. And if I don't, then they're going to tear you apart. They'll question every decision you've made, every file you've accessed, every email you've sent. They'll make you look incompetent at best, malicious at worst. Your career in HR will be over. Gerald, have you actually looked at the evidence? Have you reviewed the original incident report versus the final version? That's not the point. That's exactly the point. If the evidence was falsified, if an employee was wrongfully terminated, doesn't that matter more than protecting Mark Holloway's reputation? What matters is the company. Gerald's voice rose. What matters is not opening us up to lawsuits and bad press and internal chaos. What matters is maintaining order and trust in our systems. You're threatening all of that for one guy who doesn't even work here anymore. One guy whose life we destroyed based on lies. Alleged lies. And even if you're right, which I'm not conceding, you have to weigh the cost. One man's career against the stability of the entire company. Against your career. Against the trust that hundreds of employees place in HR to be fair and consistent. You start admitting we made mistakes, that our systems can be gamed, and the whole thing falls apart. Rachel understood what he was really saying. Admitting the truth meant admitting the system had failed. It meant other employees questioning other decisions. It meant lawsuits and investigations and chaos. It meant the comfortable order of things being disrupted. It meant choosing truth over convenience, and that was more than most people were willing to do. I can't drop it, Gerald, she said quietly. I'm sorry, but I can't. Then you're making a terrible mistake. The line went dead. Rachel sat in her car outside the diner, watching morning traffic crawl past, normal people going about their normal lives. She thought about calling her sister, her mother, her few close friends, warning them that things were about to get messy. Instead, she drove to the warehouse. It was 9 a.m. on December 26th. Ethan's shift would be ending soon. She didn't have a plan, didn't know what she'd say. She just knew she needed to see him, needed to tell him someone believed him, needed to offer something more than the empty apology forming in her mind. She parked and waited. Workers trickled out in twos and threes, looking exhausted, heading to their cars. Then she saw him, Ethan Brooks, moving slowly, his face gray with fatigue. Rachel got out of her car. Her legs felt weak as she walked toward him. Ethan. He turned and she watched recognition hit his face, followed by anger so raw it made her step back. What the hell are you doing here? His voice was low and dangerous. I need to talk to you. Really? Now you want to talk? After you fired me 3 days before Christmas? After you destroyed my life? He took a step toward her. You got some kind of guilty conscience, Lawson? Come to see how the other half lives? It wasn't supposed to, she started, but he cut her off. Wasn't supposed to what? Ruin me? Take everything from me? Make my daughter cry because Daddy can't afford the Christmas she wanted? His hands were shaking. I worked that job for 8 years, and you ended it with one signature because of a report I know was bullshit. You're right, Rachel said. Ethan stopped. What? You're right. The report was falsified. I've seen the original documentation. I know Mark Holloway set you up. I know I should have looked closer before I signed that termination. I know I let personal feelings cloud my judgment. You're right about all of it. Ethan stared at her, his anger giving way to something more complicated. Then fix it. I'm trying to. Trying? He laughed bitterly. What does that even mean? Are you going to give me my job back? Are you going to give me back the 3 days I spent wondering how to tell my daughter we might lose our apartment? Are you going to give me back my dignity? I can't give you back what you've lost, Rachel said, but I can try to make it right. I've documented everything. I've talked to witnesses. I've got a journalist looking into it. By the end of the week, everyone will know what Mark did. A journalist? Ethan's voice was sharp. You went to the press before you came to me? I had to. The company's trying to bury this. Going through official channels would take months and they'd fight it every step. This way, there's public pressure. This way, they have to act. This way, my life becomes a story for people to read over their morning coffee. My daughter has to hear about her dad being fired on the news. Have you thought about that? Rachel hadn't. The realization hit her like cold water. I'm sorry. I should have consulted you first. Yeah, you should have. Ethan rubbed his face with both hands. I can't think about this right now. I've been up for 24 hours. I'm exhausted. I just want to go home and sleep before my daughter wakes up and needs me to pretend everything's fine. I understand, but Ethan, I need you to know I'm going to fix this, whatever it costs me. He looked at her for a long moment. Why? Why now? Why do you suddenly care what happens to me? Rachel thought about all the reasons, the guilt, the evidence, the recognition that she'd become someone she didn't want to be, but what she said was simpler. Because it's the right thing to do. Because I helped hurt you, and I need to help heal it. Because my career isn't worth more than your life. Ethan's expression softened slightly. You're going to lose your job over this. Probably. They'll come after you. Make your life hell. I know. And you're doing it anyway? Yes. He nodded slowly. Okay, what do you need from me? Just tell the truth. When the journalist contacts you, tell him what happened. Tell him about the setup. Tell him about Mark's vendetta. Tell him everything. And then? And then we see what happens. Maybe it's enough. Maybe the company caves under the pressure and gives you your job back. Maybe they stonewall and we have to fight longer. I don't know. But at least we fight. Ethan looked exhausted beyond words, but there was something else in his eyes now. Not quite hope, but maybe the beginning of it. I need to think about this, he said finally. Need to sleep. Need to figure out if dragging my name through the news is worth whatever justice we might get. That's fair. But Rachel, he met her eyes. Thank you for trying. Even if it doesn't work, thank you for trying. He walked to his truck, got in, and drove away. Rachel stood in the warehouse parking lot as the morning sun climbed higher, feeling the weight of what she'd set in motion. There was no going back now. The story would run. The company would retaliate. Her career would implode. And somewhere in all that chaos, maybe, just maybe, something resembling justice would emerge. She got in her car and drove home, knowing she should rest but too wired to sleep. Instead, she spent the afternoon preparing, backing up files to multiple locations, documenting her own involvement, writing a detailed account of everything that had happened, from that first staff meeting where Ethan had criticized her system to this morning's conversation in the parking lot. If they were going to come after her, she'd make sure the full story was preserved. She'd make sure someone knew the truth, even if speaking it cost her everything. By evening, her phone was buzzing with texts from colleagues. Word was spreading that something was happening, that Rachel had gone rogue, that there was going to be a major meeting. The rumor mill was churning. Her sister texted, Mom says you're in some kind of trouble at work? Are you okay? Rachel typed back, I'm fine, just doing something I should have done sooner. I'll explain later. She tried to eat dinner but couldn't manage more than a few bites. Her stomach was twisted with anxiety and anticipation. She kept checking her email, expecting David to have questions or Gerald to send more warnings. Instead, at 8 p.m., her doorbell rang. She opened it to find Ethan Brooks standing there, looking exhausted but determined. I can't sleep, he said. Every time I close my eyes, I see my daughter's face when she asked me if Santa would still find us if we had to move. So screw it, let's burn it all down. Rachel felt something unclench in her chest. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He held out his hand. Partners? She shook it, feeling the calluses from years of honest work, the strength that came from not giving up. Partners. And somewhere in the winter night, the wheels Rachel had set in motion continued to turn, gathering momentum, heading toward a collision that would change everything. For better or worse, the truth was coming, and this time nobody was going to be able to stop it. They sat at Rachel's dining room table until well past midnight, going through everything. Ethan recounted the events of December 19th in painful detail. Every step of the repair, every protocol he'd followed, every witness who'd been present. Rachel took notes, asked questions, built a timeline that was airtight, and damning. Mark was there that morning, Ethan said, his third cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. Before the malfunction. I remember because he made some comment about me thinking I was too good for production work. Said something like, "Must be nice being the golden boy who fixes things instead of making them." I didn't think much of it at the time. Mark's always been like that. "How long has he had it out for you?" Rachel asked. Ethan rubbed his eyes. "Since I filed that complaint 8 months ago. He'd falsified a quality report to hide the fact that he'd approved a batch of defective parts. I caught it during a routine maintenance check. If those parts had gone into production, we could have had a major recall. I reported it because it was the right thing to do, but the investigation went nowhere. Mark had friends. I didn't. And he's been retaliating ever since. Nothing I could prove. Just little things. Scheduling me for the worst shifts, forgetting to pass along important information, making comments in front of other workers about my attitude. Death by 1,000 cuts, you know." Ethan's voice was bitter. "I should have seen this coming, should have known he'd escalate eventually." Rachel looked at her notes, at the pattern of harassment that was becoming clearer the more they talked. "This is good. This establishes motive. David can use this." "David's the journalist?" "Yeah, he's good, tenacious. He won't let this go once he sinks his teeth in." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "What happens after the story runs? What's the endgame here?" "Public pressure forces the company to investigate properly. They find the evidence we found. Mark gets fired. You get reinstated with back pay and compensation." "And you?" Rachel met his eyes. "I'd probably get fired too, for going to the press, for unauthorized investigation, for making the company look bad. Take your pick." "That's not fair." "No, it's not. But it's reality." She closed her laptop. "I'm not going to pretend this is some noble sacrifice. I screwed up. I let personal feelings cloud my judgment. I signed that termination letter without doing my due diligence. I have to own that." "You're also trying to fix it. That counts for something." "Does it? I keep wondering if I'm doing this for you or for me, to help you or to ease my own guilt." Ethan considered this. Maybe it's both. Maybe that's okay. They fell into silence, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and distant city sounds through the windows. Rachel realized it was the first real conversation they'd ever had. No professional barriers, no hostility, just two people trying to navigate an impossible situation. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said finally. "That staff meeting, when I criticized your evaluation system, did you really hate me for that?" Rachel felt her face flush. "Hate is a strong word, but yeah, I was angry. You embarrassed me in front of the entire staff, made me look like I didn't know what I was doing. You didn't know what you were doing. That system was terrible." Despite everything, Rachel almost smiled. It wasn't that bad. It was exactly that bad. It tried to quantify things that can't be quantified. It rewarded people who were good at looking busy over people who actually got work done. It was designed by someone who'd never spent a day on a factory floor. Okay, yes, it had flaws, but you didn't have to eviscerate it in public. "Would you have listened if I'd come to you privately?" Rachel opened her mouth to say yes, then stopped. Would she have? Or would she have dismissed him as just another floor worker who didn't understand the complexities of HR management? Probably not, she admitted. I was pretty convinced I was right. And now? Now I think maybe I should spend less time in conference rooms and more time actually understanding what I'm making policies about. She paused. I'm sorry for not listening, for letting ego get in the way of doing my job properly. Ethan nodded slowly. And I'm sorry for the way I said it. I could have been less of a jerk about it. We both could have handled things better. Yeah. Ethan stood, stretching his back with a wince. I should go. Lily's going to wake up in a few hours and wonder where I am. Mrs. Chen's probably worried sick. Wait. Rachel went to her kitchen and pulled out a container of leftovers from Christmas dinner. Take this. I know it's not much, but I can't take your food, Rachel. Yes, you can. It's just going to go bad anyway. Please. Ethan looked at the container, then at her, something complicated passing across his face. Finally, he took it. Thank you. At the door, he turned back. When the journalist calls, I'll tell him everything. Whatever it takes. Thank you. And Ethan, we're going to fix this. I hope you're right. After he left, Rachel stood at her window watching his truck pull away, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavier on her shoulders. She'd made promises she wasn't sure she could keep. She'd set events in motion that might destroy them both. But for the first time in days, she felt like she was moving in the right direction. Her phone buzzed. David. Got your guy's contact info. Planning to interview him tomorrow afternoon. Also found something interesting in public records. We should talk. Rachel called him immediately. What did you find? Mark Holloway filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago. Gambling debts. And guess who co-signed a loan to help him out of it? Who? Douglas Vance, VP of Operations at Riverside Manufacturing. They go way back, same fraternity in college, best men at each other's weddings, the whole 9 yards. Rachel's mind raced. Douglas Vance was 3 levels above Gerald in the corporate hierarchy. If he was protecting Mark, that explained why the original complaint had gone nowhere. It explained the resistance to reopening the case. That's the corruption angle, David continued. Not just one supervisor with a vendetta, a systemic problem where personal relationships trump accountability. This story gets bigger every time I dig. How much bigger? Could be huge if I can prove Vance knew about the falsified report. Could be a complete restructuring of Riverside's management. Could be your company's "Hal had Me Too" moment, except instead of sexual harassment, it's corporate favoritism and abuse of power. Rachel felt sick. David, I just wanted to help one guy get his job back. I didn't sign up to take down the entire company. Too late now. The story has legs. And honestly, Rachel, if the rot goes this deep, don't you think it should be exposed? She thought about all the other Ethan Brookses who might have been destroyed by this system. All the other employees who'd filed complaints that went nowhere because the accused had the right friends. All the times justice had been sacrificed to protect the powerful. Yeah, she said quietly. Yeah, I do. Good. Because the meeting on the 30th? That's not just about disciplining you. Vance is going to be there. They're going to try to bury this before it becomes a problem, which means we need to run the story before then. How soon? The 29th, morning edition, front page. I'll have everything verified by then. 2 days. Rachel had 2 days before her world exploded. Okay, she said. Do it. She spent December 27th in a strange fugue state, knowing what was coming but unable to stop it. She went through her apartment, organizing files, backing up documents, preparing for the possibility that she might need to leave quickly. She called her mother and sister, warning them that things were about to get complicated without explaining exactly how complicated. Her sister asked, "Are you sure about this?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." "That's very unlike you." "I know. Maybe I'm having a midlife crisis. Or maybe you're finally becoming the person you were supposed to be." Rachel wished she had that kind of confidence. That evening, David sent her the draft article. She read it on her laptop, her coffee going cold as she absorbed the full weight of what they'd built. The headline, "Riverside Manufacturing Supervisor, Allegedly Fabricated Safety Report to Destroy Employee's Career. Company Executives Accused of Cover-Up." The article was devastating. It laid out the timeline with precision, quoted from the original and final reports, included testimony from Jim Patterson, detailed Mark Holloway's pattern of retaliation, and tied it all to Douglas Vance's personal relationship with Mark and his position of power within the company. It named names. It showed documentation. It was journalism at its best, clear, factual, damning. It was also going to ruin lives. Mark's career was over. Vance would probably have to resign. Gerald would be implicated for trying to suppress the investigation. And Rachel herself was prominently featured as the HR director who'd discovered the fraud and gone to the press when internal channels failed. She'd be a whistleblower, or a traitor, depending on who was telling the story. "It's good," she texted David. "Run it." The next day, December 28th, was surreal. Rachel went about her normal routine, knowing it was probably the last normal day she'd have for a long time. She went to the gym, got groceries, did laundry. Ordinary things that felt precious because she didn't know when she'd have the luxury of ordinary again. At 6 p.m., Ethan texted her. "Talked to the journalist, told him everything. He's running the story tomorrow. Rachel, I know. Are you ready? Ethan, no, but Lily deserves to see her dad fight for himself, so I'm doing it anyway. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She lay in bed watching the clock tick toward morning, toward the moment when the article would go live and everything would change. At 3 a.m., she gave up and made coffee. At 4 a.m., she checked the newspaper's website obsessively. At 5:02 a.m., the article went live. Within an hour, her phone was exploding. Texts from colleagues, emails from reporters asking for comment, missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. And at 6:47 a.m., a call from Gerald. "What the hell have you done?" His voice was shaking with rage. "I did what you wouldn't," Rachel said calmly. "I exposed the truth. You went to the press. You made the company look like we're running some kind of criminal enterprise. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I have a pretty good idea, yes." Vance is furious. He's calling for your immediate termination. The legal department is already drafting a lawsuit against you for breach of confidentiality. Your career is over, Rachel. Over. Then I guess I don't have anything to lose by telling you that Douglas Vance co-signed Mark Holloway's bankruptcy loan and has been protecting him for years, and that you knew there were problems with that termination, but ordered me to let it go, and that if this goes to court, all of that's going to come out too. Silence on the other end, then quieter. "You're serious about this?" "Completely serious. An innocent man was destroyed because of a corrupt system. I'm not going to be part of covering that up. The meeting's been moved up. Today, 2 p.m. They want you there to answer for this." "I'll be there." Gerald hung up without another word. Rachel sat at her dining room table, watching the sun rise over the city, reading the comments section under the article. The response was overwhelming. Anger at the company, support for Ethan, calls for investigation. The story was being shared across social media. Local TV news was already reaching out for interviews. David had been right. The story had legs. At 10 a.m., a news van pulled up outside Rachel's apartment building. She watched from her window as a reporter and cameraman set up on the sidewalk. Her phone rang, a producer asking if she'd do an on-camera interview. "No comment," Rachel said, and hung up. But the calls kept coming. By noon, there were 3 news vans outside. Rachel's email had over 200 messages. The story was trending on local news websites. Riverside Manufacturing had released a terse statement. "We take these allegations seriously and are conducting a thorough internal investigation." It was happening. The thing Rachel had set in motion was becoming unstoppable. At 1:30 p.m., she got dressed in her most professional suit, armor for the battle ahead. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. This wasn't the careful, political HR director who'd spent years climbing the ladder. This was someone different, someone who'd chosen principle over comfort. She still wasn't sure if that was brave or stupid. The drive to Riverside Manufacturing was surreal. Rachel had made this commute hundreds of times, but today felt different, final, somehow. She parked in her designated spot, walked through the employee entrance, and felt the weight of stares as she passed. Everyone had seen the article. Everyone knew what was coming. Gerald met her outside the conference room on the 3rd floor. He looked 10 years older than he had 3 days ago. "They're going to destroy you in there," he said quietly. "Last chance to walk away. Resign now, sign an NDA, and maybe you can salvage something." "Who's in there?" "Vance, corporate legal, Mark Holloway, and someone from the board." Rachel's stomach dropped. The board. They were bringing out the big guns. "Any chance they're here to apologize and reinstate Ethan?" she asked, knowing the answer. "Zero chance. They're here to crucify you and contain the damage. Please, Rachel, I'm trying to help you." "No, you're trying to help the company. There's a difference." She walked past him and opened the conference room door. The room was designed to intimidate. Massive table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the factory floor below. 5 people sat on one side of the table. Douglas Vance, 50s, silver hair, expensive suit. Jennifer Park from Legal, sharp and cold. Mark Holloway, trying to look confident but failing. An older woman Rachel didn't recognize, probably from the board. And Gerald, taking a seat at the end with the air of a man attending an execution. One chair sat empty on the opposite side. Rachel's chair. Ms. Lawson, Vance said, his voice dripping with contempt. Thank you for joining us. Please, sit. Rachel sat, placing her bag deliberately on the table. Inside were copies of everything, every document, every piece of evidence, every email. If they thought they were going to intimidate her into silence, they were wrong. Let's skip the pleasantries, Vance continued. You went to the press with confidential company information. You violated your employment agreement. You damaged the company's reputation. Do you deny any of this? No, Rachel said calmly. I did all of those things. The room went silent. They'd expected defensiveness, justifications, not a flat admission. Well, Jennifer Park said, recovering first, that makes this simple. You're terminated immediately for cause. You'll sign a non-disparagement agreement and return all company property. Any further public statements will result in legal action. I don't think so, Rachel said. Vance leaned forward. Excuse me? I said I don't think so. I'm not resigning. I'm not signing anything, and I'm going to keep talking until justice is done. Mark Holloway spoke for the first time, his voice shaking slightly. This is ridiculous. She's the one who should be investigated. She's been harassing me for days, accessing my personnel files, making false accusations. Nothing I've said is false, Rachel cut in, looking directly at him. You falsified an incident report. You fabricated evidence. You destroyed Ethan Brooks' career out of personal spite, and you did it knowing Douglas Vance would protect you because of your personal relationship. That's defamatory, Jennifer snapped. You have no proof. I have all the proof. Rachel pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Original incident report showing no safety violations. Metadata proving the photographs were taken 2 days after the alleged incident. Testimony from Jim Patterson confirming you pressured him to alter his report. Documentation of Mark's previous retaliation against Ethan. Financial records showing Mr. Vance co-signed Mark's bankruptcy loan, and emails between Gerald and corporate discussing how to suppress the investigation. She watched the color drain from Vance's face, saw Mark's hands start to shake, noticed Gerald's carefully blank expression crack slightly. These are selective interpretations, Jennifer said, but her voice lacked conviction. Taken out of context. Then let's add context, Rachel said. Let's open a full investigation. Let's bring in the State Labor Board. Let's subpoena communications between Mark and Mr. Vance. Let's put everything on the record and see whose interpretation holds up. Vance's jaw clenched. You've already poisoned the well by going to the press. Anything we do now will look like a response to public pressure. Then you should have responded to private pressure when I first raised concerns. But you didn't. You tried to bury it. You tried to protect your friend, and when I wouldn't let it go, you decided to punish me instead of investigating the actual crime. The woman from the board, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke. Miss Lawson, I'm Patricia Morrison. I'm here because the board takes these allegations very seriously. But I have to ask, why didn't you come to the board directly? Why go to the press? Rachel turned to her. Because I didn't know who I could trust. Because Mr. Vance has enough influence to kill an internal investigation. Because Ethan Brooks didn't have months to wait while this wound through proper channels. He has a 7-year-old daughter and no job, and Christmas just happened. He needed justice now, not eventually. So you decided to be judge and jury? Vance said. You decided that your judgment was more important than company policy? No, I decided that an innocent man was more important than protecting corrupt executives. I decided that the truth mattered more than my career, and I'd make the same decision again. The room erupted. Vance was on his feet, shouting about insubordination. Jennifer was threatening legal action. Mark was trying to interject, to defend himself, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Gerald sat with his head in his hands. Patricia Morrison was taking notes, her expression unreadable. Then the conference room door opened. Everyone turned. A security guard stood there, looking apologetic. I'm sorry for interrupting, but there's someone here who insists on speaking to the board. She said it's about Ethan Brooks. Not now, Vance snapped. We're in the middle of... I'm afraid it can't wait, sir. She brought her father, and she says she won't leave until she talks to someone in charge. Rachel's heart stopped. No, it couldn't be. But it was. The security guard stepped aside and Lily Brooks walked into the conference room, holding Ethan's hand. She wore her purple cat ear hat and a determined expression that looked far too old for her 7 years. "What is this?" Vance demanded. "How did they even get in here?" Ethan looked shell-shocked. "Lily, we talked about this. You were supposed to wait in the car." "No, Daddy." Lily's voice was small but firm. "You said we have to tell the truth, so I'm telling the truth." Patricia Morrison stood. "Young lady, this is a private meeting. You can't just—" "My name is Lily Brooks," the girl said, her voice starting to shake but pushing through. "And these people are lying about my dad." The room went completely silent. Rachel watched Lily's small hand grip Ethan's tighter, watched Ethan's face cycle through horror and pride and helplessness. "Sweetie," Patricia said more gently, "I know you want to help your father, but this isn't the place." "Yes, it is." Lily's eyes were filling with tears now, but she didn't stop. "My dad is the best person in the whole world. He works really hard and he never lies and he always does his job right. And that man—" She pointed at Mark Holloway with a trembling finger. "That man is mean. He says bad things about my dad, and now my dad doesn't have a job and we might have to move and he cries when he thinks I'm asleep." Ethan's face crumpled. "Lily, I know you're sad, Daddy. I know you try to hide it, but I know." Tears were streaming down her face now. "And it's not fair. You didn't do anything wrong. You never do anything wrong. You're a good person. You're my dad." The silence in the room was deafening. Rachel watched Mark Holloway, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Watched Vance's expression shift from anger to discomfort. Watched Patricia Morrison's professional mask crack as she looked at this crying child defending her father. "Please," Lily said, her voice breaking, "please give my dad his job back. Please don't take away our Christmas. Please don't make him sad anymore." Ethan dropped to his knees and pulled Lily into his arms. "It's okay, Bug. It's okay. You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," Lily sobbed into his shoulder. "Because you do it for me. You always fight for me. So I'm fighting for you." Rachel felt tears burning in her own eyes. She looked around the table and saw the same thing reflected in every face except Mark's. Shame. The kind of shame that comes from being confronted with the human cost of your decisions. From having to look at a crying child and justify why her father's life had been destroyed. Patricia Morrison was the first to move. She stood and walked around the table, kneeling down to Lily's level. "Sweetheart, you're very brave, and I promise you, we're going to make this right, okay?" Lily looked up at her with red, swollen eyes. "You promise?" "I promise. Your dad is going to be okay." Ethan was shaking, his arms wrapped protectively around his daughter. Rachel saw the moment he realized what was happening, that Lily's honesty, her raw emotion, her complete lack of political calculation, had done what all the evidence and arguments couldn't. She'd made it human, made it real, made it impossible to ignore. Patricia stood and turned back to the table. When she spoke, her voice was steel. "Mr. Vance, Mr. Holloway, Miss Park, please leave. Now. I need to speak with Ms. Lawson and Mr. Brooks privately." "You can't just—" Vance started. "I can and I am. This meeting is over. Gerald, you stay." Vance looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Patricia's expression stopped him. He stood, gestured sharply to Mark and Jennifer, and walked out. The door closed behind them with a finality that felt like a verdict. Patricia turned to Ethan and Lily. "Mr. Brooks, I apologize for what you and your daughter have been put through. I apologize for the failure of this company to properly investigate the allegations against you. And I apologize for forcing a 7-year-old to fight her father's battles because the adults in the room couldn't be trusted to do the right thing." Ethan's voice was hoarse. "What happens now?" "Now we fix this." Patricia looked at Gerald. "I want a complete investigation into the falsified report. I want Mark Holloway suspended immediately pending termination. I want a review of every decision Douglas Vance has made in the last 5 years. And I want Mr. Brooks reinstated with full back pay, compensation, and a formal apology." "The board will need to approve," Gerald started. "The board will approve what I tell them to approve, because I am the board chair, and I'm not going to let this company be known for destroying families because of personal vendettas and executive corruption. Are we clear?" Gerald nodded, looking relieved to have the decision taken out of his hands. Patricia turned to Rachel. Miss Lawson, your methods were unorthodox, and you violated company policy. Under normal circumstances, I'd have to terminate you. However, these aren't normal circumstances. You expose systemic corruption at great personal risk. The company needs more people like you, not fewer. Rachel couldn't believe what she was hearing. Are you saying, I'm saying you're not fired. You're being reassigned to work directly with me on reforming our HR policies and investigation procedures. Because clearly, what we're doing now isn't working. I don't understand, Rachel said. Vance wanted me destroyed. Douglas Vance is going to be very busy explaining to the board why he protected an employee who committed fraud. He won't have time to worry about you. Patricia's smile was thin and cold. And between you and me, his time at this company is measured in days, not years. She turned back to Lily, who was still clinging to Ethan. Sweetheart, do you know what you did today? Lily shook her head. You reminded a bunch of adults that we're supposed to care about people more than we care about protecting ourselves. That took a lot of courage. I was scared, Lily admitted. Being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared. You're braver than most people I know. Lily managed a small, watery smile. Patricia stood. Mr. Brooks, expect a call from HR tomorrow with details about your reinstatement. Ms. Lawson, same for you regarding your new position. Gerald, get started on that investigation. I want preliminary findings by next week. She walked to the door, then paused. Merry Christmas, everyone. Better late than never. After she left, the three of them sat in stunned silence. Ethan was still on his knees with Lily in his arms. Rachel was gripping the edge of the table to keep her hands from shaking. Gerald looked like he'd aged another decade in the last 10 minutes. Finally, Ethan spoke. Did that actually just happen? I think so, Rachel said. But I'm not entirely sure I'm not hallucinating. Gerald stood heavily. For what it's worth, Rachel, I'm sorry. You were right. I should have pushed harder. You were protecting your career, I get it. But you didn't. You risked everything. He looked at Ethan. I'm sorry, Brooks. Truly. This should never have happened. No, Ethan agreed. It shouldn't have. But at least now it's getting fixed. Gerald nodded and left, leaving the three of them alone in the conference room. Lily pulled back from Ethan's shoulder and looked up at Rachel. Are you the lady who helped my daddy? I'm trying to, Rachel said softly. Thank you. My daddy's really good at his job. He fixes things that are broken. Rachel felt her throat tighten. Yeah, he does. Ethan stood, lifting Lily with him. He looked at Rachel with an expression she couldn't quite read. Gratitude, exhaustion, disbelief, and something else. Something that looked like the beginning of trust. We should go, he said. Lily needs lunch, and I need about 12 hours of sleep. Okay. Rachel gathered her files mechanically. I'll call you when I know more. At the door, Ethan paused. Rachel, thank you for everything, for believing me, for fighting when you didn't have to, for not giving up. Thank your daughter, Rachel said. She's the one who won this. Lily beamed, her earlier tears forgotten in the way children could reset their emotions like flipping a switch. I did good, Daddy? You did amazing, Bug. But no more surprise visits to Daddy's work, okay? You scared me half to death. Okay. Can we get pizza now? Yeah, we can get pizza. They left, Lily skipping beside her father, already chattering about toppings. Rachel stood alone in the conference room, surrounded by the debris of the confrontation. Scattered papers, cold coffee cups, the lingering tension of a battle fought and somehow, impossibly, won. She walked to the window and looked down at the factory floor. Workers moving through their shifts, unaware of what had just happened 3 floors above them. Unaware that the system that had failed Ethan Brooks was being torn down and rebuilt. Unaware that one man's injustice had just become everyone's turning point. Her phone buzzed. David. Hearing crazy rumors, did you really win? Call me. Rachel smiled and texted back. I'll tell you everything. But yeah, we won. She didn't know what came next. Didn't know if Patricia's promises would hold up once the shock wore off. Didn't know if she could actually reform a broken system or if she'd just be fighting the same battles in different forms. But standing there in the winter sunlight, watching the factory run its usual rhythms, Rachel felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, fragile, hard-won hope. And for now, that was enough. The news hit the factory floor within hours. Rachel watched from her office window as clusters of workers gathered during breaks, phones out, reading the update that had just been posted on the company intranet. Mark Holloway had been suspended pending termination. An independent investigation was underway. Ethan Brooks would be reinstated with full compensation. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing since she'd gotten back to her desk. Reporters wanting follow-up statements. Colleagues expressing shock, support, or carefully worded neutrality depending on their political calculations. Her sister calling to say she'd seen the news and was proud of her. Her mother calling to ask if she was in danger and should she come stay for a few days. Through it all, Rachel felt oddly detached. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was wearing off, leaving behind exhaustion so profound she could barely keep her eyes open. But there was work to do. Patricia had been clear. The investigation needed to be thorough, documented, and airtight. No room for appeals or legal challenges. They were going to do this right. At 4 p.m., Gerald knocked on her door. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of his own complicity. "Can we talk?" he asked. Rachel gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sure." He sat heavily, hands clasped in his lap like a penitent. "I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the professional courtesy version." "Okay." "I knew something was off about that termination. Not consciously, maybe, but somewhere in my gut. And I ignored it because it was easier. Because questioning it would have meant work and conflict and potential consequences. I chose comfort over justice." He met her eyes. "I'm sorry. You showed me what actual integrity looks like, and it wasn't pretty seeing the comparison." Rachel softened slightly. "You were in a difficult position. We were all in difficult positions. You're the only one who chose to do the hard thing." He paused. "Patricia wants me to work on the investigation with you, if you're willing to have me. Under one condition. Name it. No more protecting people just because they have friends in high places. No more dismissing complaints because investigating them would be inconvenient. We do this right, even when it's messy." Gerald nodded slowly. "Agreed. And Rachel, I meant what I said earlier. We need more people like you here. Please don't let this experience make you cynical about the possibility of change." After he left, Rachel allowed herself 5 minutes to put her head down on her desk and just breathe. The crisis wasn't over. There would be depositions, legal reviews, policy reforms, and 100 other complications. But the immediate battle had been won. Justice, imperfect and delayed, was finally happening. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Lily wants to know if you like pepperoni or cheese pizza. Apparently, we owe you a pizza party." Rachel smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She typed back, "Pepperoni. But you don't owe me anything." Ethan. "Lily says everyone deserves pizza, and she's the boss right now. Tomorrow at 6? Our apartment?" Rachel hesitated. Professional boundaries, appropriate distance, all the rules she'd been trained to follow. Then she thought about Lily's tear-stained face in that conference room, about Ethan's hand shaking as he'd tried to protect his daughter from an adult battle, about the fact that rules and boundaries had nearly destroyed an innocent family. She typed, "I'll be there. Thank you." The next morning, Rachel arrived at work to find her office had been moved. Not demoted, upgraded. A larger space on the executive floor right next to Patricia Morrison's office. A nameplate on the door read Rachel Lawson, Special Advisor to the Board, HR Reform and Compliance. Patricia was waiting inside, coffee in hand. Surprised? "That's one word for it," Rachel said, looking around at the space that was easily twice the size of her old office. "The board met last night, emergency session. We reviewed the evidence you compiled, interviewed several witnesses, and came to some conclusions." Patricia handed her a folder. Douglas Vance resigned effective immediately. Mark Holloway was terminated for cause and is facing potential criminal charges for fraud, and we're implementing a complete overhaul of our HR investigation procedures. Rachel opened the folder and scanned the first page. It was a comprehensive reform package: anonymous reporting systems, independent review boards, mandatory investigation timelines, protections for whistleblowers. "This is ambitious," she said. "It needs to be. We can't afford another Ethan Brooks situation. The board is unanimous on this. We'd rather fix our culture now than face a class action lawsuit later. Patricia sat in one of the chairs facing the desk. Your first project is implementing these reforms. You'll have a team, a budget, and direct access to the board. You'll also be reviewing every active HR case for similar irregularities. Every case, that's hundreds of files. Which is why you're getting a team. I'm not asking you to do this alone. Patricia's expression grew more serious. But I'm asking you to do it thoroughly. If there are other Mark Holloways out there, other Douglas Vances protecting their friends, I want them found. Can you do that? Rachel thought about the enormity of the task, about the enemies she'd make, the resistance she'd face, the career risk of digging into every corner of the company's HR history. Then she thought about Ethan working night shift at a warehouse because the system had failed him, about Lily crying in a conference room because the adults couldn't be trusted to do the right thing. Yes, she said, I can do that. Patricia smiled. Good, because you're exactly the kind of person this company needs. Someone who'll fight for what's right, even when it's hard. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing. The board is setting up a victims' compensation fund for anyone who was wrongfully terminated or suffered retaliation. Ethan Brooks will be the first recipient, but we want to make sure we're catching everyone. I'll need your recommendations on who should qualify. After Patricia left, Rachel sat in her new office, looking out at a view of the city she'd never had from her old space. It should have felt like victory, like vindication, like the reward for doing the right thing. Instead, it felt like responsibility, like the weight of everyone who'd been failed by the system now resting on her shoulders, like a promise she couldn't break. She opened her laptop and began making lists. Cases to review, procedures to implement, people to interview. The work stretched out before her, months or maybe years of grinding through documentation, facing resistance, proving that change was possible. But for the first time in her career, Rachel felt like she was doing work that mattered. Not just managing people, not just enforcing policies, but actually making a difference in people's lives. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. At noon, Jim Patterson appeared at her door, hat literally in hands. Miss Lawson, got a minute? Of course. Come in. He entered hesitantly, like he was expecting to be yelled at. I wanted to thank you for including my testimony in the investigation, and to apologize for not speaking up sooner. You spoke up when it mattered, Rachel said. That takes courage. Took you dragging it out of me, more like. He twisted his hat in his hands. I've been doing this job for 32 years. Thought I knew right from wrong. But when it came down to it, I chose my pension over the truth. That's not the man I thought I was. Rachel gestured for him to sit. Jim, you were put in an impossible position. The system was designed to make people like you feel like you had to choose between your integrity and your livelihood. That's not your failure. That's the system's failure. Maybe, but I still made the choice. He looked up at her. I heard you're reviewing old cases, looking for other problems. That's right. There was another one, about 18 months ago. Young woman in quality control filed a complaint about her supervisor making inappropriate comments. Investigation went nowhere. She quit a month later. Jim pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. Her name was Sarah Chen. Don't know where she ended up, but thought you should know. Rachel took the paper, feeling a familiar anger kindle in her chest. How many Sarah Chens were out there? How many people had been failed, driven out, silenced? Thank you for telling me, she said. It's the least I can do. And Ms. Lawson, if you need someone to testify, to review files, to help with this investigation, I'm in. However I can help, I'm in. I got 3 years until retirement, but I'd rather spend them doing something right than protecting my pension. After he left, Rachel added Sarah Chen's name to her list. Then she spent the afternoon pulling archived HR files, looking for patterns, for red flags, for other cases that had been dismissed too quickly or buried too conveniently. By 5 p.m., she had 17 potential cases flagged for review, 17 people who might have been failed by the system, 17 opportunities to do better. She saved her work and headed out, stopping by the factory floor on her way. Workers nodded to her as she passed, some friendly, some neutral, some openly hostile. Change made people uncomfortable. Some would see her as a hero, others as a troublemaker who'd upset the established order. Rachel was learning to live with that. She stopped at a discount store on the way to Ethan's apartment, picking up a small toy, a set of art supplies she'd seen Lily admiring in her earlier wish list. It felt important to show up with something, to acknowledge that this dinner meant something more than professional courtesy. Ethan's apartment building was modest, old but well-maintained, the kind of place where working families scraped by on tight budgets and tighter hopes. Rachel climbed the stairs to the third floor and knocked on apartment 3C. Lily answered the door, still wearing her cat ear hat, her face lighting up with delight. "You came! Daddy said you might be too busy, but you came!" "I wouldn't miss it," Rachel said, handing her the gift. "I thought you might like these." Lily tore open the paper with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of childhood, gasping when she saw the art supplies. "These are perfect. Thank you, thank you, thank you." She threw her arms around Rachel's waist in a hug that was surprisingly fierce. Ethan appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Lily, let the woman breathe. Come on in, Rachel. Sorry about the mess. We're still getting reorganized." The apartment was small but warm, filled with evidence of life being lived. Lily's drawings on the refrigerator, books stacked on every available surface, a well-worn couch that had clearly seen better days. It was nothing like Rachel's sleek, professionally decorated apartment. It felt more like home than her place had in years. They ate pizza at the small kitchen table, Lily chattering between bites about her plans to make thank you cards for everyone who'd helped her daddy. Ethan was quieter, the exhaustion of the last week still visible in the shadows under his eyes, but there was something lighter about him now. The crushing weight of injustice had been lifted. "How are you feeling about going back?" Rachel asked during a lull in Lily's monologue. Ethan shrugged. "Nervous, excited, scared that it won't work out, grateful to have the chance." He paused. "I start Monday. They're giving me the same position, same shift, even giving me a raise to make up for what I lost. It's more than I hoped for. It's what you deserved all along." "Maybe, but a week ago I didn't think I'd ever get it. A week ago I thought my life was over." He glanced at Lily, who was absorbed in drawing something with her new supplies. "She saved me, not just in that meeting. Every day since this started. Every time I thought about giving up, I'd look at her and remember why I had to keep fighting." Rachel felt her throat tighten. "She's an amazing kid. She's everything, and I almost lost the ability to give her a decent life because one man decided to destroy me." Ethan's voice hardened slightly. "I'm glad Mark's facing consequences. But part of me wishes I could make him understand what he put us through. The fear, the shame, the nights I lay awake wondering if we'd be homeless." "He knows," Rachel said quietly. "Or he will. The criminal investigation is moving forward. Financial fraud, falsifying corporate documents. He's looking at serious charges." "Good." Ethan's voice was flat. "Maybe that makes me vindictive, but I want him to suffer. I want him to know what it feels like to lose everything." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of justified anger hanging between them. Lily looked up from her drawing. "Daddy, are you still sad?" Ethan's expression softened immediately. "No, Bug. I'm getting better. Much better." "Good. Because I drew you something." She slid the paper across the table. It was a picture of 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. One was labeled Daddy, one was labeled Me, and one was labeled Rachel. "That's us," Lily explained. "We're a team. That's what Miss Morrison said. We're brave together." Rachel stared at the drawing, feeling emotions she couldn't quite name. When had she become part of this family's story? When had she stopped being the HR director who'd made a mistake and become someone this child drew into her pictures? "It's beautiful," she managed. "Thank you, Lily. You can keep it, to remember." "I will. I'll put it in my office." After dinner, Lily showed Rachel her room, a small space made magical by a child's imagination. Glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, a bookshelf made from cinder blocks and planks, drawings covering every wall. There was evidence of tight finances everywhere, but also evidence of love. Every item had been chosen carefully, valued, treasured. "This is where Daddy reads to me every night," Lily said, pointing to a chair that was clearly too small for Ethan to be comfortable in. "He does all the voices. He's really good at voices." "I bet he is." "Are you going to make sure nobody's mean to him at work anymore?" The question was so direct, so trusting, that Rachel had to kneel down to answer it properly. I'm going to try my very hardest to make sure everyone at that company is treated fairly, including your dad. I promise. Lily studied her face with the unnerving perception children sometimes had. Okay, I believe you. When Rachel left an hour later, Ethan walked her down to her car. The night was cold, their breath forming clouds in the winter air. Christmas lights still glowed in windows, though the holiday itself had passed. Thank you for coming, Ethan said. It meant a lot to Lily, to me too. Thank you for inviting me, for letting me be part of this. You are part of this. Whether you wanted to be or not, you're part of our story now. He leaned against her car. Can I ask you something? Why did you really do it? Risk everything, I mean. Was it just guilt? Rachel considered the question. At first, maybe, but then it became about something bigger. About refusing to be part of a system that destroys people for convenience. About choosing to be someone who fights instead of someone who looks away. She paused. I spent my whole career being careful, being political, playing it safe. And where did it get me? I was successful, sure, but I'd become someone I didn't particularly like. Someone who could sign a termination letter without doing her due diligence because she was angry at a guy who'd embarrassed her. You're being too hard on yourself. No, I'm being honest. I failed you. I let personal feelings override professional judgment. I was part of the problem. She looked up at him. But I'm trying to be part of the solution now. That has to count for something. Ethan nodded slowly. It counts for everything. You gave me my life back, my daughter's security, my dignity. That's not nothing. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Two people who'd been enemies, then allies, now something harder to define. I should go, Rachel said finally. But I'll see you Monday? First day back? I'll be there. She drove home with Lily's drawing on her passenger seat, feeling the weight of new responsibility settling onto her shoulders. This wasn't over. The investigation would take months. There would be resistance, pushback, people who resented the changes she was implementing. But for the first time in her career, Rachel felt like she was fighting for something that mattered. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Rachel reviewed files, made calls, met with the team Patricia had assigned to her. By Sunday night, she had a comprehensive plan for implementing the HR reforms and a list of 23 cases that needed immediate review. Monday morning, she arrived at work early and headed straight to the factory floor. She wanted to see Ethan's first day back, wanted to make sure the transition was smooth. She found him in the maintenance bay, surrounded by equipment that had been waiting for him, coworkers who greeted him with genuine warmth. The hostility she'd feared wasn't there. Instead, people seemed genuinely happy to see him back. Jim Patterson was showing him something on a work order when Rachel approached. Both men looked up. Ms. Lawson, Jim said, come to check on your handiwork? Something like that. How's it going, Ethan? Good. Really good, actually. He gestured around at the familiar workspace. Feels like coming home. Brooks, you got a minute? The voice came from behind Rachel. She turned to see a group of workers approaching, led by a woman with graying hair and kind eyes. Sure, Martinez, what's up? We wanted to say welcome back, and to say thanks to Miss Lawson here. Martinez turned to Rachel. What you did, standing up for Ethan, exposing what Mark did, that took guts. Made a lot of us think about times we didn't speak up when we should have. So thank you for reminding us what integrity looks like. Rachel felt her face flush. I was just doing what should have been done from the beginning. Maybe, but you did it when it counted. That matters. Other workers murmured agreement. Rachel saw the moment she'd been dreading transform into something else. Not hostility, but respect. These people understood that she'd risked something real to fight for one of their own. In their world, that meant everything. After they dispersed, Ethan walked Rachel back toward the administrative building. See? You're a hero now. Better get used to it. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who finally did her job properly. That makes you a hero in this place. He paused at the door. Rachel, I know we didn't start off on the best terms. And I know this whole situation has been weird and complicated, but I'm glad we ended up on the same side. You're good people. So are you, Rachel said. And Ethan? If you ever have any problems, anything at all, you come straight to me. No more suffering in silence. Deal? Deal. Back in her office, Rachel dove into the work that would consume the next several months of her life. The first case on her list was Sarah Chen, the woman who'd filed a harassment complaint and been forced out. Rachel tracked her down through LinkedIn. She was working at a smaller manufacturing company across town now, in a position well below what her qualifications suggested she should have. Rachel called her that afternoon. Ms. Chen, my name is Rachel Lawson. I'm with Riverside Manufacturing. I'd like to talk to you about the complaint you filed 18 months ago. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, why now? Why do you suddenly care now? Because we're conducting a comprehensive review of all HR cases, and yours showed irregularities that should have been investigated properly. I'd like to fix that if you're willing to talk to me. Another silence. Will it matter? Will anything actually change? I can't promise it will undo what happened to you, but I can promise that we're serious about accountability this time. The people who failed you are being held responsible. The system that allowed it to happen is being reformed. I heard about Ethan Brooks. Read the article. So, you're the one who went to the press? Yes. That took guts. They buried my complaint in 48 hours, told me I was being oversensitive, made it clear that if I pushed, I'd be fired, so I quit before they could destroy me completely. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. I loved that job. I was good at it, and they took it from me because I wouldn't put up with being harassed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Are you sorry enough to actually do something about it? Rachel thought about the Victims' Compensation Fund, about the reforms being implemented, about the chance to make things right. Yes, I am. Will you meet with me? They set up a meeting for later that week. After hanging up, Rachel added detailed notes to Sarah's file, cross-referenced the supervisor who'd been accused, and flagged 3 other complaints involving the same person that had been similarly dismissed. The pattern was unmistakable, and it made her sick. Over the next few days, Rachel fell into a rhythm. Days spent reviewing cases, interviewing witnesses, building evidence. Evenings spent implementing the new procedures, training the team Patricia had assigned to her, creating systems designed to prevent future abuses. It was exhausting, consuming work, but it felt right in a way her job never had before. On Wednesday, she met with Sarah Chen in a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory away from the company that had failed her. Sarah was younger than Rachel had expected, maybe 28, with tired eyes that had seen too much disappointment. Thank you for meeting me, Rachel said. I almost didn't come. Figured it was just more corporate PR trying to cover your asses now that the story's out. Sarah wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. But I read more about what you did for Ethan Brooks, how you risked your career, so I thought maybe, just maybe, someone actually gives a damn. I do. And I know that's easy to say, hard to prove, but I'm trying. Sarah told her story. The supervisor who'd made increasingly inappropriate comments. The complaint she'd filed through proper channels. The investigation that had lasted all of 3 days before concluding there was insufficient evidence. The subtle retaliation that followed. Worse assignments, denied opportunities, a hostile work environment that became unbearable. I held out for 2 months, Sarah said. Kept thinking someone would notice, someone would care. But nobody did. So I left before they could fire me for some made-up reason like they did to Ethan. The supervisor who harassed you, is he still with the company? Far as I know, probably moved up the ladder by now. That's how it works, right? The people who play by the rules get destroyed. The people who break them get promoted. Rachel made notes, her anger building with every detail. Not anymore. The board has authorized a victims' compensation fund. You'd qualify. It won't undo what happened, but it's something. I don't want money, Sarah said. I want justice. I want him fired. I want everyone who ignored my complaint held accountable. I want the system that protected him torn down and rebuilt. We're working on all of that. The investigation is ongoing. But Sarah, I need your formal testimony. On the record. Will you provide it? Sarah looked at her for a long moment. If I do this, will it actually matter? Or will it just get buried again? It will matter. I promise you it will matter. Okay, Sarah said finally. Okay, I'll do it. Not because I trust the system, but because I trust that you're angry enough to actually fight for change. They spent 2 hours going through every detail, Rachel documenting everything with the thoroughness of someone building an airtight case. By the time they finished, Rachel had enough to demand a full investigation into Sarah's supervisor and everyone who'd dismissed her complaint. Back at the office, she presented the case to Patricia, who reviewed it with the sharp eye of someone who'd seen too many of these stories. "This is damning," Patricia said. "How many others are there like this?" "At least a dozen that I've found so far. Probably more once I dig deeper." "Then keep digging. I want every single case reviewed. Every person who was failed by our system deserves a second look." Patricia closed the file. "And Rachel, the board is watching what you're doing. They're impressed. There's talk of making your position permanent, maybe even expanding your mandate to other divisions. I'm not doing this for a promotion. I know. That's exactly why you're the right person for it." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "You're changing the culture of this company. One case at a time, one policy at a time. You're proving that accountability matters. Don't underestimate the impact of that." That evening, Rachel worked late, plowing through more files. At 8 p.m., her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Lily wants to know if you're coming to the town Christmas tree lighting tomorrow night. Says it's not complete without our whole team." Rachel smiled. The tree lighting. She'd seen the signs around town but hadn't planned to go. But the image of Lily's hopeful face made the decision easy. She texted back, "What time should I be there?" The response came immediately. 6 p.m., Main Square. Lily says dress warm and bring hot chocolate money. The next night, Rachel found herself bundled in her warmest coat, walking through the downtown square where the town's Christmas tree stood waiting to be lit. The event had been delayed from its usual pre-Christmas date due to technical problems, turning it into a New Year's tradition instead. Families crowded the square, children running between vendor booths, the smell of roasted nuts and hot cider filling the cold air. Rachel spotted Ethan and Lily near the front of the crowd, Lily wearing her cat ear hat and bouncing with excitement. "You came!" Lily shrieked when she saw Rachel running over to grab her hand. "Come on, we got a good spot." They stood together as the mayor gave a speech about community and resilience and new beginnings. Rachel only half listened, more focused on the way Lily kept looking up at her father with pure adoration, the way Ethan's hand rested protectively on his daughter's shoulder, the way both of them had included her in their small family circle, like it was the most natural thing in the world. When the tree lights finally blazed to life, the crowd erupted in cheers. Lily grabbed both Rachel's hand and Ethan's, pulling them together. "Make a wish," Lily commanded. "You have to make a wish when the tree lights up. That's the rule." Rachel closed her eyes. She wished for the strength to keep fighting, for the courage to finish what she'd started, for justice for all the Sarah Chens and Ethan Brookses who'd been failed by systems that should have protected them. When she opened her eyes, she found Ethan looking at her with an expression that was hard to read in the glow of the Christmas lights. "What did you wish for?" Lily asked. "Can't tell," Rachel said. "Then it won't come true." "That's a good rule," Lily agreed seriously. Then she grinned. "I wished for snow, and for Daddy to never be sad again, and for pizza every Friday." Ethan laughed, the sound free and genuine in a way Rachel hadn't heard before. "Those are good wishes, Bug. Really good wishes." They stayed for another hour, wandering through the market booths, Lily chattering endlessly about school and art projects and her plans for the new year. At one point, she ran ahead to look at some toys, leaving Rachel and Ethan walking side by side. "She's doing better," Ethan said quietly. "Sleeping through the night again, not asking every day if we're going to be okay. Kids are resilient, but the last couple weeks were hard on her." "I'm sorry she had to go through that." "Yeah, well, she's tougher than I gave her credit for. Turns out she's the bravest person I know." He paused. "Second bravest, maybe." Rachel felt her face warm. "I wasn't brave. I was terrified the whole time." "That's what makes it brave. Being scared and doing it anyway." Ethan stopped walking, turning to face her. "Rachel, I know we've said thank you about 100 times, but I need you to understand what you gave back to us. It's not just a job, it's dignity. It's security. It's the ability to sleep at night without wondering if we'll lose everything. That's not something I can ever really repay." You don't need to repay it. You deserved it all along. Maybe, but I wouldn't have it without you. He reached out and squeezed her hand briefly. So thank you for fighting, for not giving up, for being someone who actually gives a damn about what's right. Before Rachel could respond, Lily came racing back, pulling on both their hands. Come on, they're giving out free cookies shaped like stars. We have to get some before they're gone. They let themselves be dragged toward the cookie booth, Lily's enthusiasm infectious, the night air full of possibility. As the three of them stood in line, Rachel felt something shift inside her. This was what mattered, not titles or promotions or professional success, but moments like this. Small victories, people helped, families whole again. She'd spent so much of her career chasing achievement, proving herself, climbing ladders. And somehow, she'd lost sight of the fact that the whole point was supposed to be making people's lives better. Now, standing in a crowded square with a 7-year-old chattering about cookie flavors and a single father who'd gotten his life back, Rachel finally understood what she'd been missing. Purpose. Real, tangible, meaningful purpose. And as the winter night wrapped around them and the Christmas tree lights blazed against the darkness, Rachel made a silent promise to herself and to every person who'd been failed by the system she was now charged with fixing. She would fight. She would hold people accountable. She would make sure that integrity mattered more than politics, that truth mattered more than convenience, that people mattered more than profit. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks and resistance and battles still to fight. But standing here, watching Lily's face light up with joy over a star-shaped cookie, watching Ethan smile without the shadow of fear that had haunted him for weeks, Rachel knew with absolute certainty that it would be worth it. Justice wasn't a destination. It was a practice, a daily choice to do better, fight harder, and never stop believing that change was possible. And Rachel Lawson was just getting started. 3 weeks into the new year, Rachel sat in her office reviewing the final investigation report. The numbers were worse than she'd anticipated. 29 cases of wrongful termination or forced resignation over the past 5 years. 47 instances of complaints dismissed without proper investigation. A pattern of retaliation so pervasive it had become normalized, invisible to everyone except those who suffered from it. Mark Holloway's termination had been just the beginning. The investigation had uncovered a network of supervisors and mid-level managers who'd protected each other, buried complaints, and destroyed careers to maintain their power. Douglas Vance had been the most visible casualty, but he was far from the only one. Patricia knocked on Rachel's doorframe. "You look like you've been here all night." "Just since 5, Rachel admitted, rubbing her eyes. "Wanted to finish the summary before the board meeting. And we have a mess that's going to take years to fully clean up. But at least now we're actually cleaning instead of just covering up." Rachel slid the report across her desk. "I'm recommending full compensation for all 29 wrongful termination cases. Reinstatement offers where possible, public acknowledgement of the company's failures, and criminal referrals for 6 individuals who clearly committed fraud." Patricia picked up the report, scanning the executive summary. Her expression grew progressively grimmer. "The board's not going to like this. The financial exposure alone is massive. The legal exposure of not addressing it is worse, and the moral imperative to make this right isn't negotiable." Rachel met her eyes. "You told me to be thorough. This is thorough." "I know, and you're right," Patricia sighed. "But prepare yourself for pushback. There are still people on the board who think we should minimize exposure, settle quietly, move on quickly. They're going to argue that dredging up old cases does more harm than good." "What do you think?" "I think that's exactly the kind of thinking that created this mess in the first place." Patricia set the report down. "I'm with you, Rachel, but this fight isn't over. It's just entering a new phase." The board meeting that afternoon was everything Rachel had expected, and worse. She presented her findings with the same methodical precision she'd used to build the case against Mark Holloway, laying out evidence that was impossible to dismiss but deeply uncomfortable to acknowledge. 5 board members sat around the conference table, their expressions ranging from supportive to openly hostile. Patricia sat at the head, her face carefully neutral as Rachel walked through each recommendation. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then Thomas Brennan, the CFO, spoke up. "Ms. Lawson, no one here disputes that mistakes were made. But what you're proposing would cost the company upwards of $15 million. That's not a trivial sum. Neither is the cost of doing nothing, Rachel said. Every person we wronged represents a potential lawsuit, a potential news story, a potential PR disaster. Addressing this proactively is actually the most cost-effective approach. Or, Brennan countered, we settle the cases where we have clear liability, offer NDAs, and move forward without admitting systemic failure. We can't change the past. We can only control how we handle the present. Rachel felt anger rising in her chest. With respect, Mr. Brennan, that's exactly the kind of calculation that allowed this to happen. Treating people as liabilities to be managed instead of human beings who deserve justice. I'm treating them as both, Brennan said coolly. But I have a responsibility to this company's financial health. $15 million could mean layoffs, reduced benefits, actual harm to current employees who did nothing wrong. Then maybe we should look at executive compensation instead of punishing workers for management's failures. The words were out before Rachel could stop them. The room went silent. Patricia's eyes widened slightly. Brennan's face flushed red. "Excuse me?" he said. Rachel knew she'd crossed a line, but there was no going back now. "I'm saying that the people who created this mess, who profited while employees were being destroyed, should bear the cost of fixing it, not the workers who had nothing to do with it. Are you suggesting we cut board compensation to fund your crusade?" "I'm suggesting we prioritize making victims whole over protecting the people who enabled their victimization." Brennan stood abruptly. "This is outrageous, Patricia. I will not sit here and be lectured by Sit down, Thomas." Patricia's voice was steel. "Ms. Lawson is doing exactly what we hired her to do, and she's right. We can't preach accountability while protecting ourselves from its consequences." Brennan remained standing, his jaw clenched. "If we go down this path, I want it on record that I opposed it. When the shareholders start asking why our profits are down, I want everyone to remember who pushed for this." "Noted," Patricia said. "Now sit down so we can finish this discussion like professionals." The debate raged for another 2 hours. Rachel defended her recommendations, fielded hostile questions, refused to back down even when every instinct screamed at her to compromise, to soften her position, to make this easier for everyone. Finally, Patricia called for a vote, 4-1 in favor of implementing Rachel's full recommendations. Brennan was the lone dissent. "The motion carries," Patricia said. "Ms. Lawson, you have authorization to proceed with victim compensation, reinstatement offers, and criminal referrals. Draft a public statement acknowledging our failures and outlining our reforms. And Thomas, start working on a budget that doesn't involve layoffs." After the meeting, Rachel sat in her office feeling simultaneously victorious and exhausted. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Lily drew you another picture. This one has you riding a dragon. Apparently you're a dragon rider now." Despite everything, Rachel smiled. She texted back, "Dragons are my specialty." The response came immediately. "She also wants to know if you're coming to her art show at school next Friday. She's very insistent." Rachel checked her calendar. She had 3 meetings scheduled that afternoon, all of them important. Then she thought about Lily's face, about the child who'd stood in a conference room and fought for her father with nothing but honesty and love. "I'll be there. What time?" Over the next month, Rachel threw herself into the monumental task of contacting every person who'd been wronged, offering compensation and reinstatement where possible, acknowledging harm where it couldn't be undone. Each conversation was its own kind of heartbreak. Sarah Chen took the compensation but declined reinstatement. "I've moved on," she said. "I have a good job now, with people who value me. But thank you for caring enough to try." Others accepted immediately, grateful for the chance to return to careers that had been stolen from them. Some were angry, wanting more than money could provide. A few refused to engage at all, too hurt by what had happened to trust that anything had really changed. Rachel understood all of it. Justice delayed was justice denied, and no amount of compensation could give people back the years they'd lost, the opportunities that had passed, the damage to their sense of self-worth and security. But it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was the company finally saying, "We were wrong and we're trying to do better." Throughout it all, Rachel found herself leaning on an unexpected support system. Ethan became someone she called when the work got overwhelming, when she needed to talk to someone who understood what it meant to be on the receiving end of corporate indifference. Their conversations ranged from practical advice about how to approach traumatized former employees to deeper discussions about justice, forgiveness, and whether systems could really change. Lily provided a different kind of support. Regular drawings delivered through her father, each one depicting Rachel in increasingly fantastical scenarios. Rachel as a superhero, Rachel as an astronaut, Rachel as a wizard casting spells. The unfiltered admiration of a 7-year-old who thought Rachel hung the moon. Rachel kept every single drawing, pinned them to the wall of her office where she could see them during difficult days. They reminded her why this work mattered, why fighting was worth it even when it was hard. On Friday, she left work early for the first time in weeks to attend Lily's art show. The elementary school gymnasium was crowded with proud parents and excited children, artwork displayed on tables around the perimeter. Rachel found Ethan standing near Lily's section, looking simultaneously proud and overwhelmed by the chaos. "Thanks for coming," he said. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did. I promised." Rachel looked at the artwork on display, a series of paintings Lily had done showing different seasons. They were good, showing a natural talent that went beyond typical 7-year-old ability. "She's talented," Rachel said. "She gets it from her mom. Sarah was an artist." Ethan's voice was soft. "She died 3 years ago. Cancer. It was fast and brutal, and by the time we knew something was really wrong, it was too late to do anything but say goodbye." Rachel felt her heart clench. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "No reason you would. But yeah, it's been just me and Lily since then, learning how to be both parents, how to fill the spaces Sarah left behind." He paused. "That's why losing my job was so terrifying. She made me promise to take care of Lily, to make sure she had everything she needed. And I almost failed at the one thing that mattered most." "But you didn't fail. You fought. You survived. You're still here. Because you helped." Ethan looked at her. "Sarah would have liked you. She was big on people who actually gave a damn about doing the right thing." Before Rachel could respond, Lily came running over, her face flushed with excitement. "You came. Did you see my paintings?" "I did. They're beautiful." "That one's my favorite." Lily pointed to a summer scene full of bright colors and sunshine. "It's the park where Daddy takes me. See the swings? And the big tree where we have picnics?" "I see it. You captured it perfectly." Lily beamed. Then she grabbed Rachel's hand with the unself-conscious affection of childhood. "Come meet my teacher. I told her all about how you helped my daddy." Rachel let herself be dragged across the gymnasium to meet a kind-faced woman in her 50s who smiled warmly. "Ah, you must be Rachel. Lily talks about you constantly. You and her father are apparently the heroes of her personal story." "She's the real hero," Rachel said. "I just helped a little." "From what I understand, you did more than help a little. What you did took real courage." The teacher lowered her voice. "I've taught for 28 years. I've seen too many kids whose parents were destroyed by systems that didn't care. It's nice to see someone actually fighting back." After the art show, Ethan suggested they get dinner, all 3 of them. They ended up at a family restaurant that was loud and cheerful, with crayons at every table and a kids' menu shaped like a rocket ship. Lily colored enthusiastically while they waited for food, chattering about her classmates and upcoming projects. Rachel found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did, the professional armor she usually wore falling away. This wasn't networking. This wasn't strategic relationship building. This was just dinner with people who'd somehow become important to her. "So how's the investigation going?" Ethan asked after Lily had wandered off to look at the dessert display case. "Brutal, necessary, overwhelming." Rachel took a sip of water. "But we're making progress. 29 people are getting compensation. 6 criminal referrals went to the DA's office. And we've implemented 17 new policies to prevent this from happening again." "Do you think it'll work, the new policies?" "I think it's better than what we had. But real change isn't about policies. It's about culture. It's about making people believe that reporting problems won't destroy them, that speaking truth to power won't end their careers." Rachel paused. "That's the harder work. That's what'll take years." "But you're doing it." "I'm trying to." Rachel looked at him. "Some days I wonder if it's enough. If anything I do can actually make a difference in the long run." It already has. Look at me. Look at all those other people you're helping. That's not abstract, that's real. Ethan leaned forward. You know what Lily said the other day? She said when she grows up, she wants to be like you, someone who helps people and isn't afraid of anything. Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. I'm afraid of lots of things. But you do it anyway. That's what being brave means. Lily returned with definitive opinions about dessert. They should all get chocolate cake because chocolate cake was objectively the best. They indulged her, and Rachel found herself laughing at Lily's chocolate-covered face, at the easy warmth of this makeshift family dinner, at the unexpected joy of being included in their small circle. As they were leaving, Lily took both their hands again, swinging between them as they walked to the parking lot. This was the best day, she announced. Art show and dinner and chocolate cake and both my favorite people. Both? Ethan asked, pretending to be wounded. I thought I was your favorite person. You're my favorite daddy, Lily said seriously. And Rachel's my favorite Rachel. You're different categories. They reached Rachel's car, and she knelt down to Lily's level. Thank you for inviting me to your art show. I love seeing your paintings. Will you come to the next one, in the spring? If I can, absolutely. Lily threw her arms around Rachel's neck in a fierce hug. I'm glad you're our friend. You make Daddy smile again. After they left, Rachel sat in her car for a long moment, overwhelmed by emotions she couldn't quite name. Somewhere along the way, this had stopped being about guilt or professional redemption. These people had become real to her, important to her, family, in a way she hadn't expected. The following week, the company's public statement went live. It was unprecedented. A major corporation acknowledging systemic failure, naming specific cases, committing to comprehensive reforms. The media response was immediate and intense. Rachel did interview after interview, carefully explaining the changes being implemented while refusing to throw individual employees under the bus. This wasn't about bad people, she told one reporter. This was about bad systems that made it easy for people to make bad choices. Our job now is to create systems that make it easier to do the right thing. The publicity brought unexpected consequences. Other companies reached out, asking for consulting on their own HR reforms. Universities invited Rachel to speak. Advocacy groups wanted to partner on broader workplace justice initiatives. Patricia called her into her office on a Tuesday afternoon. The board wants to make your position permanent. Director of Workplace Integrity and Reform. Expanded mandate across all divisions. Significant budget increase. Are you interested? Rachel thought about it. About the work still undone. About the Sarah Chens and Ethan Brookses still out there, waiting for someone to fight for them. About the culture change that would take years to fully implement. Yes, she said, but on one condition, which is no more quiet settlements, no more NDAs to hide problems. Everything we do transparently. If we mess up, we acknowledge it publicly. If we fix something, we share how so other companies can learn. No more protecting our reputation at the expense of truth. Patricia smiled. The board anticipated you'd say something like that. They agreed to it before I called you in here. They did? Turns out having principles is good for business. Who knew? Patricia stood and extended her hand. Congratulations, Director Lawson. Try not to burn the place down. No promises. That evening, Rachel called Ethan to tell him the news. His genuine happiness for her success made something warm bloom in her chest. We should celebrate, he said. Lily's been asking when we can do another pizza night. She has very strong opinions about celebration protocols. Pizza night sounds perfect. Tomorrow, 6 o'clock? I'll be there. But the next day brought unexpected complications. Rachel was in the middle of reviewing a new policy draft when her assistant buzzed. There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. A Mark Holloway? Rachel's blood ran cold. Mark had been fired, was facing criminal charges, had every reason to blame her for the destruction of his life. What was he doing here? Should I call security? Her assistant asked, clearly concerned. Rachel thought about it, then said, No, send him in, but stay close just in case. Mark Holloway walked into her office looking like a man who'd aged a decade in 6 weeks. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a worn jacket. His confident swagger had been replaced by something that looked like defeat. Ms. Lawson, he said, standing awkwardly by the door. Thank you for seeing me. What do you want, Mark? He flinched at her tone. I wanted to apologize. I know it doesn't mean much. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it. Rachel studied him, looking for manipulation or calculation. She found only exhaustion and what looked like genuine remorse. Sit down, she said finally. He sat, hands clasped in his lap. I've had a lot of time to think about what I did, about why I did it. And the truth is, I don't have a good reason. Brooks embarrassed me, made me look bad. And instead of dealing with it like an adult, I destroyed his life. Because I could. Because the system let me. The system you helped build and maintain, Rachel said. Yeah, I did, Mark's voice cracked. I told myself I was just playing the game, that everyone did it, that it was Brooks' fault for not knowing how things worked. I had a dozen justifications, and they all sounded reasonable right up until I had to watch that man's daughter cry in a boardroom because of what I'd done. Rachel said nothing, waiting. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Mark continued. I don't deserve it. I'm probably going to jail. My wife left me. My friends won't return my calls. My career is over, and all of that is my fault. He looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, what I was. And I'm sorry for what I did to Brooks, for what I tried to do to you, for all of it. Why are you telling me this? Because my lawyer says I should be thinking about character witnesses for sentencing, about people who might say I'm not completely irredeemable. He laughed bitterly. But I realized I don't deserve that. I don't deserve anyone speaking up for me, so I'm not asking. I just wanted you to know that at least one person who is part of the problem understands why it has to change. Rachel felt a complicated mix of emotions. This man had nearly destroyed Ethan, had been part of a system that hurt dozens of people, deserved every consequence coming his way. But he was also a human being sitting in front of her, broken by the weight of his own choices, trying to take responsibility in the only way he knew how. I appreciate you saying this, Rachel said carefully. But Mark, the person you really need to apologize to is Ethan Brooks, not me. I know, I tried to call him. He won't pick up. Can't say I blame him. Would you be willing to apologize in writing? A real apology, taking full responsibility? Mark nodded. If he'd accept it, yes. I'll ask him. No promises. Rachel stood, signaling the conversation was over. And Mark, I hope you use this time to really think about how you got here, about what kind of person you want to be when you come out the other side. Because the system that enabled you is being torn down. The world you knew doesn't exist anymore. After he left, Rachel sat at her desk for a long time, processing the conversation. She'd expected to feel satisfaction at seeing Mark brought low. Instead, she just felt sad. Sad about the waste of it all, the unnecessary suffering, the lives damaged because people chose power over integrity. That evening at Ethan's apartment, she told him about Mark's visit. He listened quietly, his expression unreadable. He wants to apologize? Ethan said finally. He offered to put it in writing, to take full responsibility. I think he's genuine, but I could be wrong. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, absently watching Lily play with her toys in the corner. Part of me wants to tell him to go to hell, wants to make sure he suffers the way he made me suffer. That's understandable. But another part of me just feels tired. Like holding on to that anger takes energy I don't have. Like maybe accepting his apology isn't about letting him off the hook. It's about me being able to move forward. He looked at Rachel. What do you think? I think forgiveness is complicated. You don't owe it to him, but you might owe it to yourself to consider it. Yeah, Ethan rubbed his face. Tell him I'll accept a written apology, but I don't want to see him or talk to him, just the letter. I'll let him know. Lily looked up from her toys. Daddy, is it pizza time yet? Soon, Bug. Rachel and I are talking about grown-up stuff. Boring. Lily returned to her play and Rachel found herself smiling at the casual dismissal. They ate pizza at the small table, Lily regaling them with increasingly elaborate stories about her day at school. Rachel found herself watching Ethan, noticing how much lighter he seemed now. The fear and exhaustion that had haunted him were fading, replaced by something that looked like hope. After dinner, while Ethan was putting Lily to bed, Rachel stood at the window looking out at the city lights. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. From that moment in Gerald's office when she'd signed a termination letter without asking enough questions, to this evening in a modest apartment that felt more like home than her own place. She'd lost things along the way. Her certainty that systems could be trusted, her belief that following rules was enough, her comfortable detachment from the consequences of her decisions. But she'd gained something more valuable, a sense of purpose that went beyond career advancement, relationships built on truth instead of professional politeness, the knowledge that she was capable of fighting for what mattered, even when it cost her. "She wants you to come say goodnight," Ethan said, appearing from the hallway. "Apparently the bedtime ritual isn't complete without you." Rachel followed him to Lily's small room. The girl was tucked into bed, clutching her worn rabbit, her eyes already heavy with sleep. "Rachel," Lily said drowsily, "will you keep helping people, even after my daddy doesn't need help anymore?" Rachel knelt beside the bed, smoothing Lily's hair. "Yes, sweetheart, I promise." "Good. Because you're really good at it. You're like a superhero, but with meetings instead of capes." Despite the weight of everything, Rachel laughed. "Meetings instead of capes, I like that." "I love you, Rachel," Lily said with the uncomplicated directness of childhood. "You're part of our family now." Rachel felt her throat tighten. "I love you too, Lily. Sleep well." Back in the living room, Ethan poured them both coffee, and they sat on the worn couch in comfortable silence. "She meant that, you know," Ethan said eventually. "The family thing. You've become important to us." "You've become important to me too," Rachel admitted. "More than I expected. More than probably makes sense." "Why doesn't it make sense?" "Because I'm the HR director who fired you. Because our whole relationship started with me making a terrible mistake that nearly destroyed your life. Because there are probably a dozen professional ethics rules about this." "About what? Being friends?" Rachel looked at him, at his open expression, his honesty. Were they just friends? Or was this something more complicated, something that had been building through shared crisis and hard-won trust? "Is that what we are?" she asked quietly. "Friends?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. "I don't know exactly what we are, but I know that when good things happen, you're one of the first people I want to tell. When things are hard, talking to you makes them easier. And when Lily does something cute or says something funny, I find myself thinking about how much you'd enjoy it." "That sounds like more than friends." "Yeah, it does." He turned to face her fully. "But I also know the timing is weird. We met under the worst possible circumstances. I don't want you to feel obligated because you feel guilty. I don't want this to be about me being grateful you fixed what you helped break." "Is that what you think this is?" "I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out." Rachel thought about the past 6 weeks, about how her feelings had evolved from guilt to responsibility to genuine caring, about how much she looked forward to Lily's drawings and Ethan's texts, about how right it felt to be here in this small apartment with these people who'd somehow become central to her life. "I think," she said slowly, "that maybe we should stop trying to figure out what this is and just let it be what it becomes. No expectations, no pressure, just honesty and time and seeing where things go." Ethan smiled, and it transformed his face. "I can work with that." They sat talking until nearly midnight, the conversation flowing easily between serious and light, past and future, fears and hopes. When Rachel finally left, Ethan walked her to her car, and for a moment they stood in the cold night air, the space between them charged with possibility. "Thank you," Ethan said, "for everything, for fighting for me, for caring about Lily, for being exactly who you are. Thank you for giving me a chance to do better, to be better." He leaned in and kissed her forehead gently, a gesture that felt like promise and gratitude and something tender that was just beginning. Rachel drove home with her heart full, windows down despite the cold, letting the winter air wake every nerve. The city sparkled around her, full of people living their own complicated stories, fighting their own battles, trying to find their own versions of justice and love and meaning. 6 weeks ago, she'd been drowning in guilt and fear, terrified that doing the right thing would destroy her life. Now she was driving away from a future that looked nothing like what she'd planned and everything like what she'd needed. The work ahead was still enormous. There were policies to implement, cases to review, people to help. The culture at Riverside wouldn't change overnight. There would be setbacks and resistance and days when progress felt impossible. But Rachel had learned something crucial in the fire of the past 6 weeks. She'd learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing to act despite it. She'd learned that systems could change if people were willing to fight for that change. She'd learned that doing the right thing might cost you everything, but not doing it cost you something more important: your integrity, your self-respect, your ability to look at yourself in the mirror. And she'd learned that sometimes the people you hurt become the people who teach you the most about grace and forgiveness and the possibility of redemption. 3 months later, Rachel stood at a podium in a hotel conference room addressing a gathering of HR professionals from across the state. The conference had invited her to speak about the Riverside reforms, about how to create workplace cultures that valued truth over comfort. She looked out at the audience and saw people at every stage of their own journeys. Some were eager, taking notes, hungry for change. Others looked skeptical, protective of the systems they knew. A few looked openly hostile, seeing her as a threat to the comfortable order of things. Rachel understood all of them. She'd been all of them at various points. "I'm going to tell you a story," she began, "about a man who was fired 3 days before Christmas because I signed a document without asking enough questions. About a 7-year-old girl who had to fight her father's battles because the adults had failed. About a system so broken that good people made terrible choices and called them necessary." She told the whole story, holding nothing back. Her mistakes, her fears, the moment she'd decided that her career wasn't worth more than another person's life, the cost of speaking truth, the unexpected rewards of choosing integrity. The audience was silent, transfixed. "I'm not standing here as an expert who has it all figured out," Rachel concluded. "I'm standing here as someone who screwed up badly and got a chance to make it right, who learned that real change is possible, but only if we're willing to pay the price for it. That price might be our comfort, our certainty, our professional advancement. But the alternative, staying silent while people suffer, costs us something we can't get back: our humanity." The applause was thunderous. Afterward, people lined up to talk to her, to share their own stories of workplace injustice, to ask for advice on implementing reforms in their own organizations. A young woman approached near the end, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said. "I was about to quit my job because I reported harassment and nothing happened. But hearing you speak, hearing that change is possible, it made me think maybe I should fight instead. Maybe one person can make a difference." Rachel took both the woman's hands in hers. "One person can absolutely make a difference, but you don't have to do it alone. There are resources, advocacy groups, people who will stand with you. And if you need help navigating this, here's my card. Call me." The woman clutched the card like a lifeline. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Rachel drove home that evening feeling the weight of new responsibility settling on her shoulders. Every speech she gave, every interview she did, every person she inspired to fight their own battles, it all added up to something larger than herself. A movement, maybe, or at least a conversation about what workplaces could be if we demanded better. Her phone rang as she pulled into her parking garage. "Ethan." "How'd the speech go?" he asked. "Good. Intense. I think I convinced at least a few people to actually try changing their systems. That's my dragon rider, slaying corporate culture one speech at a time." Rachel laughed. "Lily's been updating my mythology again? She has you fighting like 3 different kinds of evil now? It's very elaborate. She drew a whole comic book." "I can't wait to see it." "Well, you can see it at dinner tomorrow, if you're still coming." They'd been doing this for weeks now, regular dinners, family time, building something that felt increasingly solid and real. Slowly, carefully, letting trust deepen into something more. "I'll be there. Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself, and maybe prepare for Lily to pitch you her idea for a movie about your life. She's very insistent it should star someone named Zendaya." "I'm flattered by her casting choice." After they hung up, Rachel sat in her car for a moment, marveling at how much had changed. 6 months ago, she'd been a different person, careful, political, focused on climbing ladders and protecting her position. She'd been successful by every conventional measure, but hollow in ways she hadn't wanted to acknowledge. Now her life looked messier on paper, more complicated, more risky, but also more real, more meaningful, more aligned with the person she actually wanted to be. The following Saturday, Rachel found herself at the park with Ethan and Lily, watching the girl play on the swings while spring sunshine warmed their faces. It was the park from Lily's painting, the one she'd displayed at her art show, and seeing it in real life felt like stepping into one of those moments you knew you'd remember years later. "I've been thinking," Ethan said, his hand finding hers on the bench between them, "about what comes next." "Yeah? Lily starts second grade in the fall. I've been at Riverside for almost a year again now. Things feel stable in a way they haven't in a long time." He paused. Stable enough to start thinking about the future. Real future, not just getting through the next week. Rachel's heart started beating faster. What kind of future? The kind where maybe we stop pretending this is casual, where we acknowledge that what we have is important and worth protecting and building on. He turned to face her. The kind where I tell you that I love you and ask if maybe you feel the same way. Rachel felt tears spring to her eyes. "You love me?" "Yeah, I do. Probably have for a while now. Just didn't want to say it until I was sure you were ready to hear it." "I love you too," Rachel said, the words feeling both monumental and simple. "I didn't plan to. Didn't expect to. But I do." Ethan kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Lily was standing in front of them with her hands on her hips. "Finally," she announced. "I was wondering when you two would figure it out." They both laughed, and Ethan pulled Lily into a hug that included Rachel, the three of them tangled together in the spring sunshine. A family built not by biology or convenience, but by choice and truth, and the hard work of healing. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Rachel and Ethan sat on his apartment balcony, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow, Rachel would go back to her office and continue the work of reforming workplace culture. There would be more cases to review, more people to help, more battles to fight. The work would never be truly finished. But tonight, she let herself just be here. Present, content. Wrapped in the warmth of Ethan's arm around her shoulders, the sound of Lily's soft breathing from inside, the knowledge that she'd found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked. "About how 6 months ago I thought my life was ending, and it was, in a way. But it was also beginning." Rachel leaned into him. "About how the worst mistake I ever made led me here. To you. To Lily. To work that actually matters. To becoming someone I'm proud to be." Funny how that works sometimes. Yeah, funny how that works. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe around them. Two people who'd been broken and wrong and lost finding their way to something better. Not perfect, not easy, but real and honest and worth fighting for. In the distance, the lights of Riverside Manufacturing glowed against the night sky. Rachel thought about all the people inside, the ones still fighting for fairness, the ones benefiting from the reforms she'd implemented, the slowly changing culture that proved systems could be better if people demanded it. She thought about Sarah Chen, now thriving in a new job with compensation that acknowledged the harm done to her. About Jim Patterson, 3 months from retirement, spending his final days training new supervisors in the importance of integrity. About Patricia Morrison, still fighting board battles to prioritize people over profit. About every person whose life had been touched by the choice to speak truth instead of accepting comfortable lies. The work would continue. The battles would keep coming, but Rachel had learned that she was strong enough to fight them. That courage wasn't something you either had or didn't have. It was something you chose every day in 1,000 small moments that added up to a life lived with integrity. And she had learned that sometimes the people you hurt become the people you love. That redemption was possible. That change was real. That one person choosing to do the right thing could ripple outward in ways impossible to predict. "Rachel?" Lily's sleepy voice came from the doorway. "I had a bad dream." Rachel stood immediately. "Come here, sweetheart. Want to tell us about it?" Lily shuffled over and climbed into Rachel's lap, still clutching her rabbit. "I dreamed that you went away and didn't come back." "I'm not going anywhere," Rachel said, smoothing Lily's hair. "I promise. You're stuck with me now." "Good," Lily mumbled, already drifting back to sleep against Rachel's shoulder. "Because you're family, and family doesn't leave. Ethan met Rachel's eyes over Lily's head, and in that look was everything they'd been through and everything still to come. The challenges and complications and beautiful mess of building a life together. The sacred responsibility of raising a child. The daily choice to love honestly and fight fiercely and never stop believing that better was possible. Rachel held Lily close and looked out at the city that had almost destroyed them and then became the place where they found each other, where justice had finally been served, where a system had changed because people refused to accept that it couldn't, where a story that began with a signature on a termination letter had become something infinitely more important, a testament to the power of choosing right over easy, truth over comfort, love over fear. And as the night deepened and the city lights blazed against the darkness, Rachel Lawson knew with absolute certainty that every risk had been worth it, every fear overcome, every battle fought. Because in the end, this was what mattered, not titles or success or professional advancement, but this moment, these people, this imperfect, beautiful, hard-won life built on the foundation of truth and sustained by the courage to keep fighting for what was right. She was exactly where she was meant to be, and that was everything.